5 months after my wife died, I spotted her at a market. Then I followed her home. Something shocking happened. The funeral was in March. Cherry blossoms were just beginning to open, those soft pink petals catching on the shoulders of mourners dressed in black. I remember thinking how cruel that was, that spring would come anyway, indifferent to the fact that Sarah was gone. Her casket had been white, closed. The accident had been that bad. They told me it was better this way, that I should remember her as she was, beautiful, alive, laughing at my terrible jokes while she stirred her coffee with too much sugar. I held on to that advice like a lifeline for 5 months. 5 months of sleepwalking through a life that felt like someone else's abandoned property. The house still smelled like her lavender shampoo. Her toothbrush sat in the holder next to mine. Dried bristles pointed toward a future that would never come. I couldn't bring myself to move it. Some mornings, I'd stand in the bathroom doorway and just stare at it. This tiny artifact of a person who desperated from existence on a rainy Tuesday in March. People tell you grief comes in waves. What they don't tell you is that sometimes it comes as silence. This vast, terrible quiet that fills up all the spaces where a person used to be. Sarah talked in her sleep, did you know that? She'd have whole conversations with dream people I'd never meet, her voice muffled by the pillow, words tumbling out in that soft murmur that used to make me smile in the dark. Now the bedroom was a tomb of silence. I'd wake up at 3 a.m. reaching for her, finding only cold sheets and the crushing weight of reality. August came hot and heavy, the kind of heat that makes asphalt shimmer and leaves you sticky with sweat before you've even stepped outside. I'd been avoiding the grocery store, our grocery store, the one where Sarah used to spend 20 minutes comparing organic versus conventional tomatoes while I pretended to be annoyed but secretly loved watching her concentrate on such small decisions. But I'd run out of coffee, and I'd run out of excuses, and grief or no grief, a man needs his caffeine. The parking lot was half empty at 2 p.m. on a Thursday. Most people were at work living their normal lives, their intact lives where wives didn't die in car accidents on rainy Tuesdays. I grabbed a cart with a wobbly wheel because, of course I did, and headed inside where the air conditioning hit me like a baptism. Cold, clinical, alive. I was in the coffee aisle standing in front of the Colombian roast that Sarah always insisted was too acidic when I saw her. You need to understand something. When you lose someone, your brain plays tricks. It wants so badly to find them again that it starts seeing them everywhere. A woman with the same haircut 3 cars ahead in traffic. A laugh that sounds almost right coming from a stranger's table at a restaurant. Your mind is desperate, so it offers you these ghost sightings. These may be possibilities that dissolve the moment you look too closely. I'd seen Sarah a dozen times in 5 months. Each time my heart would stop, then restart with a painful thud when the woman turned and revealed a stranger's face. Each time I'd feel foolish and broken, and somehow more alone than before. But this was different. She was in aisle 7 cleaning supplies, reaching for a bottle of the eco-friendly dish soap she'd always sworn by. The one that cost $3 more, but was better for the fish. I could see her profile, the slope of her nose, the way her hair fell just past her shoulders, that honey-brown shade that caught gold in the sunlight. She was wearing jeans and a green linen blouse I didn't recognize. But her hands, God, her hands were the same. Delicate wrists, that small scar on her left thumb from when she'd tried to core an apple and the knife slipped. My cart's wobbly wheels squeaked as I stood frozen. Coffee forgotten. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Someone's phone was ringing, tiny and distant. The world had narrowed to a tunnel, and at the end of that tunnel was my dead wife reading the back of a soap bottle with the same concentrated expression she'd given those tomatoes 1,000 times before. I want to tell you I called out to her, that I rushed forward and grabbed her shoulders and demanded to know how she was alive, where she'd been, why she'd let me suffer through 5 months of hell while she browsed for cleaning supplies in the same damn grocery store where we'd shopped together for 3 years of marriage. But I didn't. Instead, I followed her. Something was wrong. Not just the cosmic wrongness of a dead woman buying dish soap, something else. Something in the way she moved, purposeful and unhurried. Like she had every right to be there, like she hadn't died, like there hadn't been a funeral with a closed white casket and cherry blossoms falling on black shoulders, and me standing at a graveside trying to figure out how to keep breathing without her. She moved through the store with easy familiarity, picking up items I recognized. The overpriced granola she loved, Greek yogurt, those terrible protein bars that tasted like sweetened cardboard. My cart followed at a distance, guided by hands that had gone numb. I barely breathed. If this was a hallucination, I didn't want to wake up. If this was real, if this was somehow impossibly real, I needed to know more before I shattered it. She paid with a credit card. I watched from the magazine rack, pretending to study celebrity gossip while my heart hammered so hard I could feel it in my teeth. The cashier chatted with her, something about the heat, typical small talk. And Sarah smiled, that smile, the one that had made me propose after only 6 months because I couldn't imagine a future without seeing it across the breakfast table every morning. She was real, solid, talking to the cashier about weather patterns, and wasn't it just oppressive this year? Her voice was the same, that slight rasp she got when she was tired or had talked too much or was about to laugh at something ridiculous. I abandoned my cart in the magazine aisle and followed her out. The parking lot heat hit like a physical blow after the air-conditioned store. I squinted against the glare, watching as Sarah, or whoever she was, whatever this was, loaded her groceries into the trunk of a silver Honda Civic, not her car. Sarah had driven a blue Corolla that was currently sitting in my garage, gathering dust and bad memories. The Corolla she died in had been totaled, crushed and twisted and taken away by people who dealt with such things. She slid into the driver's seat. The Honda's engine turned over smoothly. I ran to my car. If you've ever followed someone through city traffic, you know it requires a kind of focused paranoia. Stay close enough not to lose them at lights. Stay far enough back that they don't notice the same car behind them for 10, 15, 20 minutes. My hands were slick on the steering wheel. My throat was dry. The air conditioning in my car wheezed and rattled, but never got truly cold. We drove for 25 minutes out of the commercial district where our grocery store sat, through neighborhoods that grew progressively more upscale. Tree-lined streets, well-maintained sidewalks, houses that spoke of money. Not wealth exactly, but comfort, security. The kind of life Sarah and I had been building toward before a rainy Tuesday stole our future. She pulled into the driveway of a 2-story colonial, white with blue shutters. A garden out front with roses that someone had been tending carefully. A child's bicycle lay on its side near the garage door, bright red against the green lawn. I parked across the street, 3 houses down, beneath the shade of a massive oak tree. Sarah, and I still thought of her as Sarah, despite everything screaming that this couldn't be her, shouldn't be her, was cosmically impossible to be her, got out of the Honda. She opened the trunk, gathered her grocery bags. The front door of the house opened, and a little girl came running out, maybe 6 years old, dark hair and pigtails. She wore a purple dress with some cartoon character I didn't recognize. "Mommy!" The word carried across the street, clear and bright. Sarah knelt down, set the groceries aside, and caught the little girl in a hug. They stayed like that for a long moment. This tableau of maternal love that felt like a knife twisting in my chest. Then a man appeared in the doorway, tall, maybe 40, with graying hair and a polo shirt tucked into khakis. He smiled at them, that easy smile of a man whose life made sense, whose wife hadn't died 5 months ago, whose Thursday afternoon included normal things like coming home hugs and groceries, and a family that was whole and real and breathing. Sarah stood up, grocery bags in hand, and they went inside together. The door closed. I sat in my car beneath the oak tree, the engine ticking as it cooled, my hands still gripping the steering wheel like it was the only solid thing left in the universe. The rational part of my brain, the part that had held me together through the funeral, through the insurance paperwork, through boxing up Sarah's clothes for donation, started running through possibilities. Twin sister, doppelganger, some cosmic coincidence of bone structure and mannerisms that had fooled me from a distance. The brain sees what it wants to see, and I wanted so desperately to see Sarah that I'd invented her in a stranger's face. But that scar on her thumb, the way she'd tilted her head while reading the soap bottle, the exact shade of her hair, the smile that I'd memorized the contours of during 3 years of marriage, and countless mornings watching her drink too sweet coffee. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands, opened our photos. There were hundreds of them. Sarah at the beach, Sarah at her sister's wedding, Sarah making faces at the camera while attempting to cook dinner. I selected one from 3 months before the accident. Close up, clear lighting. I zoomed in on her face, committing every detail to memory, then looked back at the house with blue shutters where the woman who was or wasn't my wife had just disappeared behind a closed door. Same curve of the jaw, same small mole near her left ear. Same everything. I sat there for 2 hours. As the afternoon stretched toward evening, the shadows grew longer. The oak trees' shade shifted and left me in glaring sunlight that made my eyes water. Or maybe that was something else. Twice I reached for the door handle, ready to march up to that house and demand answers. Twice. I stopped myself because what would I say? What could I possibly say that wouldn't sound insane? "Excuse me, I think that's my dead wife you have living in your house." At 5:47 p.m., I started the car and drove home. The house felt emptier than it had that morning, if such a thing was possible. Sarah's toothbrush still pointed toward its impossible future. Her lavender shampoo still scented the bathroom air, but now these artifacts felt different. Not relics of the dead, but what evidence? Props in a play I didn't understand. I stood in the shower until the water ran cold, trying to wash away the last 2 hours, trying to make sense of what I'd seen. When that didn't work, I sat on the edge of our bed, my bed, in the dark, and stared at nothing while my mind spun in circles. She'd had a child, that little girl with pigtails. Mommy, she'd called her. But Sarah and I had been trying for a baby for over a year before she died. Before I thought she'd died, every negative pregnancy test had been a small heartbreak. We'd been talking about fertility specialists, about adoption, about all the paths to parenthood when biology refused to cooperate. And now she was someone's mother, someone else's wife, living in a house with blue shutters and roses in the garden and a red bicycle on the lawn. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Instead, I sat at the kitchen table with our photo album spread out in front of me, searching for what? Clues. Evidence that the woman I'd loved and married and mourned had been someone other than who I thought she was. Our wedding album showed Sarah in white lace, radiant, her hand in mine as we cut the cake, her engagement ring catching the light. That ring had been buried with her. I'd insisted on it, slipped it onto her finger one last time before they closed the casket. But in the grocery store, I'd seen rings on her left hand. I tried to remember if they were the same. The memory slipped away like water. At 3 a.m., I made a decision. Tomorrow, I'd go back. I'd watch that house. I'd find proof one way or the other. Either I was losing my mind, grief finally breaking something fundamental in my brain, or my wife had staged her own death. And I needed to know which. Because here's the thing about grief that no one tells you. It's not just sadness. It's not just missing someone. It's the terrible, crushing weight of all the unanswered questions, all the things you never said, all the futures that got canceled without warning. For 5 months, I'd been living with that weight, learning to carry it, finding ways to breathe under its suffocating pressure. But if Sarah was alive, if she'd chosen to let me suffer while she played house with someone else, while she hugged a daughter I didn't know existed, while she bought dish soap and smiled at cashiers and lived a life that didn't include the man who'd buried an empty casket and tried to figure out how to survive her absence. If that was true, then grief wasn't the right word for what I was feeling anymore. The sun came up, Friday morning, painted the kitchen in shades of gold. I made coffee, the Colombian roast that was too acidic and tasted nothing. My hands were steady now. My heart had stopped racing. I felt calm, purposeful. Whatever came next, I'd be ready for it. The truth was out there, living in a house with blue shutters, and I was going to find it. Friday morning arrived with the kind of crystalline clarity that feels almost mocking when your world is falling apart. I sat in my car across from the house with blue shutters at 6:47 a.m., a thermos of bad coffee wedged between my thighs and a notebook open on the passenger seat. The notebook was empty except for the address I'd scrolled at the top. 2847 Maple Grove Lane. Such an ordinary address for such an impossible situation. I told myself I was being methodical, scientific, even gathering evidence before drawing conclusions. But the truth, and I was starting to understand that truth was a more complicated thing than I'd ever imagined, the truth was that I needed to see her again, to confirm that yesterday hadn't been some grief-induced hallucination, some cruel trick my desperate mind had played while I stood in the coffee aisle mourning the woman who used to debate the acidity of beans. The street was quiet in that early morning way. A jogger passed, earbuds in, ponytail swinging. 2 houses down, someone dragged their trash bin to the curb. Normal people doing normal things in their normal lives, where dead wives stayed dead, and reality followed recognizable rules. At 7:15, the garage door of 2847 Maple Grove Lane rumbled open. The man emerged first. Same polo shirt as yesterday, different color. He carried a briefcase and moved with the purposeful efficiency of someone running slightly late. He backed a black SUV out of the garage, paused to wave at someone inside the house, then drove away. I watched his taillights disappear around the corner, my pen hovering over the notebook. Husband leaves for work, 7:17 a.m. God, I'd become a stalker, a spy observing the mundane rhythms of strangers. Except they weren't strangers, were they? At least one of them wasn't. Unless I was wrong, unless my mind had finally broken under the weight of 5 months' grief, and I was sitting outside a random house watching a random family because I couldn't accept that Sarah was gone. At 7:42, the front door opened again. She wore a yellow sundress this time. The color made her skin glow in the early light. Her hair was pulled back in a loose ponytail, and she held the little girl's hand as they walked to the silver Honda. The child clutched a backpack covered in unicorns, chattering about something I couldn't hear from across the street. Sarah, the woman who looked exactly like Sarah, who moved like Sarah, who tilted her head while listening to her daughter the same way my Sarah used to tilt her head when I told her about my day. She smiled and opened the back door, helped the child into a booster seat. Mother and daughter. 7:43 a.m. School run. They drove past my car. I slouched down instinctively, though the oak tree's shadow probably hid me well enough. The Honda turned left at the corner. I waited 30 seconds, then followed. The elementary school was 12 minutes away, brick and glass with a playground visible from the drop-off loop. I parked in the visitor lot and watched as Sarah pulled up to the curb. The little girl unbuckled herself with the practiced ease of routine, leaned forward to kiss her mother's cheek, then hopped out and ran toward a group of kids near the entrance. Sarah waited until the child disappeared inside before driving away. I followed her to a coffee shop. The irony wasn't lost on me. Sarah. My Sarah. The original Sarah. The Sarah who died 5 months ago in a twisted metal coffin on a rainy Tuesday. She'd been a barista when we met. I'd walked into that downtown cafe 7 years ago looking for caffeine and walked out with her phone number scribbled on my cup. She'd drawn a little heart next to the digits. I still had that cup somewhere buried in a box of mementos. I couldn't look at without feeling like my chest was caving in. This coffee shop was called The Daily Grind, which was aggressively unoriginal, but looked clean and well-maintained. She parked, went inside, emerged 8 minutes later with a to-go cup and what looked like a muffin. She sat in her car for a moment, and I watched her take that first sip the way I'd watched her take 1,000 first sips, eyes closing, small smile. That moment of pure appreciation for good coffee done right. Then she pulled out her phone. I was too far away to see what she was looking at, but I could see her face change. The smile faded, her brow furrowed. She set the coffee down carefully, both hands on the phone now, scrolling or typing or reading something that made her shoulders tense. For 3 full minutes, she stared at that screen. Then she made a call. The conversation lasted 90 seconds. I watched her mouth move, watched her free hand gesture the way it always did when she was explaining something complicated or frustrating. When she hung up, she sat very still for a long moment before putting the car in reverse. Phone call 8:23 a.m. appeared upset. The next stop was a yoga studio in a strip mall sandwiched between a dry cleaner and a physical therapy office. The sign read, Serenity Flow Yoga, in that flowing script that seems legally required for such establishments. She went inside carrying a rolled mat I hadn't noticed in the car. Through the glass front, I could see her greeting the woman at the desk with a hug. That easy familiarity of regular customers and friendly staff. I sat in the parking lot for the next hour and 15 minutes. This was insane. I knew it was insane. A sane person would have confronted her in the grocery store. A sane person would have called the police, reported some kind of fraud or identity theft or whatever crime you call it when your dead wife turns out to be alive and living with another family. A sane person certainly wouldn't be conducting surveillance from a rental car that smelled like the Pine air freshener dangling from the rearview mirror. But sanity requires a stable foundation, and mine had been demolished the moment I saw her reaching for eco-friendly dish soap in aisle 7. She emerged from the yoga studio at 10:03, looking relaxed and loose-limbed in a way that made something twist in my gut. We'd done yoga together, Sarah and I. Well, she'd done yoga while I'd attempted it with all the grace of a drunken flamingo. She'd laughed at my wobbling tree pose, then shown me how to adjust my stance, her hands gentle on my hips while I tried not to fall over. That had been 2 years ago, a Sunday morning. Rain tapping on the windows while we contorted ourselves on the living room floor. And she told me that yoga wasn't about perfection. It was about presence. I wondered if she was present now, if she ever thought about the life she'd left behind, the husband who'd mourned her, the future they'd buried in a white casket. From the yoga studio, she drove to a grocery store, different from yesterday's, smaller, more specialized. One of those organic markets where everything costs twice as much and comes wrapped in promises about sustainability and fair trade. I followed her inside this time, keeping 2 aisles between us, pretending to study bulk grains while she selected vegetables with the same careful attention she'd always given produce. That's when I noticed the ring. She reached for an avocado, checking for ripeness with a gentle squeeze, and the light caught her left hand. 2 rings. A wedding band and an engagement ring, not the ones I'd given her. These were different. Platinum, maybe, or white gold. The engagement ring had a larger stone emerald cut, more expensive than the modest round diamond I'd saved 3 months to afford when I proposed on that beach at sunset, while she cried and said yes, and kissed me with salt on her lips from the ocean spray. Evidence of a whole other life, a whole other love story, a whole other man who'd probably almost saved for months to buy that ring, who'd probably planned the perfect proposal, who'd probably also believed in forever. Did he know? Did the man with the polo shirt in the briefcase? The man who waved from the doorway and drove an SUV to work, did he know that his wife was someone else's widow? Or was he as much a victim in this as I was? She moved through the store with purposeful efficiency. Kale, quinoa, that expensive almond milk that Sarah used to call unnecessary but delicious. The cart filled with healthy choices and organic promises. At the checkout, she chatted with the cashier about a community garden project, something about volunteer hours and heirloom tomatoes. Her voice carried that warm enthusiasm she'd always had for things that mattered to her: sustainability, community, making the world slightly better in small, tangible ways. I wanted to scream. I wanted to march over there and grab her shoulders and shake her until she explained how she could be so casually alive while I'd spent 5 months learning to breathe around the hole she'd left behind. But I stayed frozen in the bulk grain section, my hands clenched around a bag of organic quinoa I had no intention of buying, while she paid and left and drove away in her silver Honda to her house with blue shutters and her daughter with pigtails, and her life that didn't include me. I followed her home, watched her carry groceries inside, watched the door close behind her. Then I drove to the cemetery. The headstone was gray granite, simple and dignified. Sarah Elizabeth Morrison, beloved wife. March 15th, 1990. March 7th, 2023. Forever in our hearts. My parents had helped me choose it. I'd been too broken to make decisions, too shattered to think about fonts and finishes and the words you use to summarize a life on a rectangle of stone. I stood there in the noon heat, sweat soaking through my shirt, and stared at my wife's grave. The grass had grown over the plot now, no longer the raw earth of fresh burial. Someone, probably the cemetery maintenance staff, had placed flowers in the built-in vase. White roses. Sarah had loved white roses. I saw you today, I said to the headstone, to the empty plot beneath it, to the absence that might not be an absence at all. You were buying avocados, checking for ripeness like you always did. 3-second squeeze test, right? That's what you called it. A crow landed on a nearby headstone, tilted its head at me with that judgmental look crows seem to perfect. There's a little girl, I continued. Dark hair, purple dress yesterday. She calls you mommy and a man. Husband, presumably. Nice house, garden with roses, the whole domestic dream we were supposed to have together. The crow flew away. I stood alone among the dead, talking to a grave that might not contain who I thought it contained, trying to make sense of the impossible. Here's what I knew. 5 months ago, there had been an accident, a rainy Tuesday evening. Sarah had been driving home from her sister's house, the route she'd taken 100 times. The police report said she'd hydroplaned, lost control, crossed the center line. The impact had been catastrophic. The other driver, a college student named Marcus Webb, had walked away with minor injuries and major trauma. Sarah had been pronounced dead at the scene. I'd identified her body. Or had I? The memory came back now, sharp and terrible. They'd shown me her hand, just her hand through a small window in a sheet, her wedding ring, the scar on her thumb from the apple sing incident. That had been enough. I'd said, yes, that's her. That's my wife. And I turned away before I could see more because I couldn't bear to see what the accident had done to the woman I loved. But I'd never seen her face. They'd said it was too damaged. They'd said I should remember her as she was. And I'd been so deep in shock, so thoroughly broken, that I'd accepted their advice. I'd let them close the casket. I'd buried someone, something, without ever confirming what I was putting in the ground. Who's in there? I asked the headstone. Who the hell did I bury? The cemetery offered no answers, just row upon row of stones marking people who were actually dead, who hadn't faked accidents and abandoned their spouses to start fresh with new families and houses with blue shutters. I pulled out my phone and called Detective Morrison. No relation to Sarah, despite the shared last name, just one of life's small coincidences that had seemed almost cosmically significant when he'd introduced himself 5 months ago as the investigator assigned to the accident. "Mr. Chen," he answered on the third ring. "This is unexpected. How are you holding up?" "I need to see the accident report again," I said. "The full report and the coroner's findings, everything you have." A pause. "Michael, we went through all this. I know it's hard to find closure. But please," my voice cracked. "I need to see it. There are some discrepancies I need to verify." Another pause. Longer this time. "What kind of discrepancies?" "How do you explain to a police detective that your dead wife is alive and buying organic vegetables? How do you make that sentence without sounding unhinged?" "Just details about the identification," I said carefully. "I need to confirm some things for the life insurance claim." It was a lie, but it was a plausible lie. Insurance companies were notorious for finding reasons to delay payment. Detective Morrison sighed, the sound of a man who'd seen too many grieving relatives go down rabbit holes of denial. "I can have the file ready Monday morning," he said. "Come by the station around 10 o'clock. But Michael, sometimes these questions don't have satisfying answers. Sometimes an accident is just a terrible accident." "I know," I said. "Thank you." I hung up and stood there in the cemetery heat, surrounded by the honestly dead, and tried to piece together what I knew versus what I thought I knew versus what I was desperately hoping wasn't true. The woman I'd seen looked exactly like Sarah. Same face, same mannerisms, same scar on her thumb. But she had a daughter who looked around 6 years old. Sarah and I had only been married 3 years. The math didn't work unless she'd been pregnant before we met, which was impossible because I'd known her for 4 years before the wedding, and there'd been no secret child, no mysterious past she'd hidden. Unless everything had been a lie. Unless the woman I'd married had been someone other than who she claimed to be. Unless... My phone buzzed, a text from Sarah's sister, Jennifer. "Thinking about you today. 5 months. Can't believe it's been 5 months. Lunch soon." I stared at the message. Jennifer had been devastated at the funeral. She'd sobbed through the entire service, had to be supported by her husband on either side. They'd been close, Sarah and Jennifer. Talked on the phone 3 times a week, visited each other constantly. If anyone would know if Sarah had secrets, it would be her sister. But what if Jennifer was part of it? What if the whole family had known? The paranoia was setting in now. That creeping suspicion that poisons everything it touches. I could feel it spreading through my thoughts like ink in water, darkening every memory, making me question every moment of the past 7 years. I texted back, "Lunch, Monday. Need to talk to you about something." Her response came quickly. "Of course. Noon at the Garden. Miss you." The Garden was the cafe where Sarah had worked when we met, where she'd drawn a heart on my coffee cup, where this whole story had started. Back when I'd believed in things like fate and forever and the simple truth that when you love someone, they love you back without reservation or deception. I drove home as the afternoon dissolved into evening, made dinner. I didn't eat. Sat in the living room where Sarah and I had watched movies and made love and planned our future. And I tried to decide what I believed. Either I was losing my mind or my wife had orchestrated an elaborate scheme to fake her death and start a new life. Both options were impossible. Both options were terrifying. But by Monday, I'd have the accident report. I'd have lunch with Jennifer. I'd start collecting facts instead of surveillance notes and paranoid theories. And somehow I'd find the truth, even if it destroyed me. Saturday morning found me in the guest bedroom surrounded by boxes I'd avoided opening for 5 months. Sarah's things, her clothes, her books, her collection of coffee mugs with terrible puns printed on them. Espresso yourself. Brew can do it. She thought they were hilarious. I'd pretended to be embarrassed when she used them, but secretly, I'd loved how something so small could make her smile. Now I was looking for evidence, proof, some hidden truth buried in the mundane artifacts of her life. I started with her jewelry box, a wooden thing with a ballerina that twirled when you opened the lid. The mechanism had broken years ago, so the ballerina just stood there frozen mid-pirouette while I sifted through earrings and necklaces and the small treasures she'd collected. Her grandmother's locket, the pearl studs I'd given her for our first anniversary, a bracelet from high school with charms that told stories I'd heard a dozen times, the tiny book for her love of reading, the coffee cup because, even at 16, she'd been addicted to caffeine, the small star because her middle name was Stella. Wait, I picked up her driver's license from the bottom of the box where she'd apparently tossed it the last time she'd cleaned out her wallet. Sarah Elizabeth Morrison, birth date March 15th, 1990. The photo showed her smiling, that half-smile people do when they're told to pose but feel awkward about it. But her middle name was Stella. Sarah Stella Morrison. That's what she told me. That's what was on our marriage certificate. I was sure of it. I dropped the jewelry box and went to the filing cabinet in the study. Our marriage certificate was in the folder labeled Important Documents, filed alphabetically because Sarah had been methodical about these things. I pulled it out with shaking hands. Sarah Elizabeth Morrison, not Stella. Elizabeth. I sat back on my heels, the certificate trembling in my grip. It was a small thing, maybe meaningless. People had middle names they didn't use. Maybe Stella was a nickname, a family thing. Maybe I'd misremembered. Grief does that. It scrambles the details, makes you uncertain about the things you thought you knew. But I didn't think I'd misremembered. I could hear her voice in my head from that third date when we'd shared our full names like they were secrets. Sarah Stella Morrison. My mom loved the stars, said I was her little star from the moment I was born. I'd thought it was beautiful, romantic, the kind of origin story that made you believe in the goodness of the universe. Now it felt like a lie. I spent the next 4 hours going through every document I could find. Her birth certificate. There wasn't one in our files. I'd never thought about it before, never needed it. But it should have been there with all the other important papers. Her passport showed Sarah Elizabeth Morrison, issued 6 years ago. Her social security card, same name. Her college diploma from State University, Bachelor of Arts in English Literature, awarded to Sarah Elizabeth Morrison. But on the corkboard in her home office, pinned among grocery lists and appointment reminders, I found a birthday card from her mother. To our darling Stella on her 30th birthday. You shine brighter every year. Love, Mom and Dad. Stella Elizabeth. 2 different middle names, 2 different identities, or just a family nickname I was reading too much into. I took photos of everything, the documents, the card, the driver's license. I was building a case, I realized, collecting evidence like I was preparing for trial. But trial of what? Trial of whom? My dead wife, who might not be dead? The woman in the house with blue shutters who might not be my wife? Reality itself, which had proven unreliable. By noon, I was exhausted and no closer to answers. I made coffee, the too acidic Colombian that Sarah had hated, and stood at the kitchen window watching rain begin to fall. Of course, it was raining. The universe had a sense of dramatic irony. My phone rang. Jennifer. For a moment, I considered not answering. What would I say to her? Your sister might not be dead, or might not be your sister, or might be living a double life with a child I never knew existed. But she was Sarah's family, the only family I had left now that my own parents had passed. And if anyone could help me untangle this mess, it might be her. Hey, Jen. Michael. Her voice was warm, concerned. I was worried about you yesterday. 5 months is such a hard milestone. Are you doing okay? Define okay, I said, aiming for humor and landing somewhere near hysteria. A pause. That bad, huh? Listen, I know we said Monday, but I'm free today if you want to talk. Sometimes these things can't wait. I looked at the rain, at the boxes scattered around the guest bedroom, at the evidence board I'd apparently been constructing in my mind. Yeah, today would be good. The garden had too. Perfect. I'll bring tissues. She hung up and I stood there holding my phone, wondering what I was about to do. Confide in my sister-in-law that I might have seen her dead sister buying dish soap? Share my growing suspicion that nothing about Sarah had been what it seemed? Or just have lunch with someone who'd known Sarah her whole life and hope that casual conversation might reveal something? Anything that made sense. I arrived at the garden 20 minutes early and ordered coffee. I didn't want the cafe had changed since Sarah worked here. New paint, different furniture, younger staff who didn't remember the girl who used to draw hearts on coffee cups. But the smell was the same. That rich aroma of roasting beans and steamed milk, and the indefinable scent of a place where people came to feel human. I sat at a corner table and watched the rain streak the windows. Couples came and went. A woman with a laptop worked intensely in the opposite corner. A group of teenagers laughed too loudly near the counter. Normal people living normal lives in a normal world. Jennifer arrived at 1:58, shaking rain from her umbrella and scanning the cafe with red-rimmed eyes that suggested she'd been crying recently. When she saw me, she smiled. That sad, brave smile people use when they're trying to be strong, and waved. She looked so much like Sarah, it hurt. Same bone structure, same way of moving through space with that unconscious grace. But where Sarah had been soft edges and warm colors, Jennifer was sharper somehow, more defined. She wore her dark hair shorter, had a no-nonsense efficiency that had always made me think she'd be running her own company by 40. She was 35 now, working as a financial analyst for some firm downtown, married to David, who sold insurance and played golf and treated her like she'd hung the moon. Michael, she hugged me tight, and I smelled her perfume, something floral and expensive that Sarah had always teased her about. You look terrible. Thanks. You look like you've been crying 5 months, she said simply, as if that explained everything, which maybe it did. She sat down, ordered a latte from the hovering barista, and studied my face with the kind of intensity that made me worry she could see straight through to the chaos in my head. So, what did you want to talk about? Your text sounded urgent. How do you start this conversation? How do you tell someone that their dead sister might be alive without sounding completely unhinged? I took a breath. Tell me about Sarah's childhood. Jennifer blinked. Her childhood. Michael, we've talked about this before many times. Humor me. I need to hear it again. She frowned but nodded. Okay. We grew up in Connecticut. Small town, nice neighborhood. Dad was a teacher, Mom was a nurse. Sarah was 3 years older than me, so she was always the protective big sister. She was brilliant in school, especially English and creative writing. She went to state on a partial scholarship, studied literature, worked at a cafe to pay for the rest. We've always been close. And her middle name? Elizabeth. Why? I pulled out my phone and showed her the birthday card. Your mother calls her Stella here. Jennifer's expression softened. Oh, that it was just a family nickname. Mom was obsessed with astronomy. Used to take us stargazing. She called Sarah her little star, Stella in Latin. It stuck as a pet name, but her actual middle name was Elizabeth after our grandmother. It made sense. It was reasonable. And yet, did Sarah ever mention wanting kids before we met? Now Jennifer looked genuinely confused. Kids? No, not really. I mean, She liked the idea of being a mother someday, but she was focused on her career when you two met. Why are you asking me this? The barista brought Jennifer's latte. I waited until she left before continuing. Did she ever seem like she was hiding something? Like there was a part of her life she kept separate? Michael. Jennifer reached across the table and took my hand. What's going on? You're scaring me. I looked at her. This woman who'd sobbed at her sister's funeral, who'd helped me plan the service because I couldn't function, who'd been calling and texting for 5 months to check on me because she'd lost her sister and I'd lost my wife. And we were both drowning in the same grief. Either she was the world's greatest actress or she genuinely believed Sarah was dead. I think I saw her, I said quietly, on Thursday at the grocery store. Jennifer went very still. Saw who? Sarah. I saw Sarah buying dish soap and granola and all the things she used to buy. And I followed her. The words tumbled out now, unstoppable. She drove to a house in the suburbs, nice place, blue shutters. There was a little girl, maybe 6, who called her mommy and a husband. I watched her do yoga and shop at the organic market and dropped the kid at school. And Jennifer, it was her. Same face, same mannerisms, same scar on her thumb from when she cut herself with that apple core. Jennifer's face had gone pale. Michael, Sarah is dead. We buried her. You identified her body. I identified her hand. Just her hand. They said her face was too damaged, that I shouldn't see. And I didn't question it because I was in shock. Because I trusted them, because the idea that anything else could be true was impossible. I was gripping my coffee cup so hard my knuckles had gone white. But what if it wasn't her? What if someone made a mistake? Or what if? What? Jennifer's voice had gone sharp. What if my sister faked her own death? Let us all suffer while she started a new life with a secret family. Michael, listen to yourself. You sound paranoid, delusional. I know how it sounds. Do you? She pulled her hand back because it sounds like you're so deep in grief that you're seeing things that aren't there. It sounds like you need help. Professional help. I'm not crazy. I didn't say you were crazy. I said you're grieving. There's a difference. Her eyes were wet now. I see Sarah everywhere too. In crowds. In stores, in cars passing by. It's normal. It's how our brains cope with loss. They try to bring back the person we've lost by finding them in strangers. This wasn't a stranger who looked like her. This was her. It wasn't. Jennifer's voice broke. Sarah is dead. Michael, I know you don't want to believe it. God knows I don't want to believe it, but she's gone. And inventing conspiracy theories about secret families isn't going to bring her back. It's just going to destroy you. We sat in silence for a long moment. The cafe buzzed with life around us, conversations and laughter, and the hiss of the espresso machine. Normal sounds in a normal place where normal people didn't discuss whether their dead loved ones might be alive and living double lives. I have photos, I said finally, from Thursday. I took pictures of a stranger who looks like Sarah. Look at them, please. Just look and tell me I'm wrong. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to the shots I'd taken from across the street. They weren't great, too far away, too much shadow from the oak tree. But you could see her profile as she helped the little girl into the car. You could see the shape of her face, the way she moved. Jennifer looked at the screen for a long time. Too long. When she finally spoke, her voice was careful. She has the same build, similar coloring. But Michael, this could be anyone. The angle is bad, the distance is too far, and you're seeing what you want to see. What about this one? I showed her a closer shot from the organic market, taken while pretending to examine overpriced almond milk. Jennifer zoomed in, her finger trembling slightly. For a moment, just a moment, something flickered across her face. Doubt? Recognition? Then it was gone, replaced by a sad certainty. "It's not her," she said, handing back the phone. "I'm sorry, but it's not." You hesitated. I hesitated because I wanted it to be her. Because for one insane second, I let myself hope. She wiped at her eyes, but hope isn't reality. Sarah is dead. The police investigated. The medical examiner confirmed it. We had a funeral. You need to accept this and move forward. What if I can't? Then you get help. Therapy, medication if needed, whatever it takes to work through this. She stood up, leaving her latte mostly untouched. "I love you, Michael, your family, but I can't enable this delusion. If you're seeing Sarah everywhere, if you're following women and taking pictures and building conspiracy theories, then you need professional help, not someone feeding into your fantasies." "It's not a fantasy." "Then prove it," she said. "Go to the police, show them your photos, see what they say." "But Michael, when they tell you it's not her, when they confirm what I'm telling you right now, you need to promise me you'll get help." She left without saying goodbye. I sat alone at the corner table, staring at the photos on my phone, trying to see them through Jennifer's eyes. Was she right? Was I so desperate to have Sarah back that I'd convinced myself a stranger was my wife? Had grief finally broken something fundamental in my perception of reality? But that scar on her thumb, the way she tilted her head, the exact shade of her hair in the sunlight. I pulled up the photo from the grocery store and zoomed in on her left hand. The rings were visible, just barely. I zoomed further until the image became pixelated, but I could still make out the shape. Platinum or white gold, emerald-cut diamond. Not my ring. Not the ring I'd buried with whoever, whatever, was in that grave. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Stop following me or I'll call the police." My heart stopped. I stared at the message, reading it 3 times, 4 times. My hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped the phone. She'd seen me. The woman at 20,847 Maple Grove Lane had noticed my car, my surveillance, my desperate stalking. But the text didn't say, "Stop following my wife or leave us alone." It said, "Stop following me." Me as in, I know who you are and what you're doing, as in, I see you seeing me. I typed back with trembling fingers, "Sarah." 3 dots appeared indicating she was typing. They pulsed for 10 seconds, 20, 30. Then they disappeared. No response came. I sat in the garden cafe where this whole story had started 7 years ago, where Sarah had drawn a heart on my coffee cup and smiled and changed my entire life. And I stared at those 3 words on my screen. "Stop following me or I'll call the police." Not a denial. Not, "I'm not Sarah," or "You have me confused with someone else." Just a warning, a threat, a confirmation that she knew exactly who I was, which meant she knew exactly what she'd done. I stood up, left money on the table for coffee I hadn't touched, and walked out into the rain. The city blurred through water and tears and the terrible clarity of understanding. My wife, if she was my wife, was alive, and she was threatening to have me arrested if I got too close to the truth. Monday couldn't come fast enough. Sunday was the longest day of my life, and I'd had some long days lately. The kind where minutes stretch into hours and hours into small eternities of waiting and wondering and slowly losing your mind in the space between one breath and the next. I didn't go back to Maple Grove Lane. The text message had been clear enough, and the last thing I needed was a restraining order before I'd gathered enough evidence to prove I wasn't insane. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table with every document I could find related to Sarah, to our marriage, to the accident that had supposedly killed her, and I built a timeline. Because here's what I'd learned in my previous life as an auditor before grief turned me into something else entirely. Numbers don't lie. Documents don't lie. People lie. People are magnificent at lying, at creating elaborate fictions that sound plausible until you start checking receipts and dates and the small details that don't quite add up. So I checked. Sarah and I met on October 14th, 2016. She was 26, working at the Garden Cafe while figuring out what to do with an English degree, as she'd put it. We dated for 6 months before I proposed on that beach at sunset. Married 3 months later in a small ceremony with 30 guests. Her family, my family, a handful of close friends, nothing extravagant. Sarah had wanted simple and meaningful, so that's what we'd done. Or at least, that's what I remembered. But memory is a story we tell ourselves, and stories can be edited. I pulled up our wedding photos on my laptop and studied them with an auditor's eye. Sarah, in her simple white dress, bought off the rack at a bridal boutique. Me, in a suit I'd owned for 3 years. Jennifer as maid of honor, crying happy tears. My best friend Marcus as best man, grinning like an idiot because he'd had 3 beers before the ceremony. Sarah's parents, Carol and Richard Morrison, looking proud and slightly tearful in the front row. I zoomed in on Carol's face. She was watching Sarah with an expression I'd always interpreted as maternal love and joy. But now looking closer, I saw something else. Worry, concern, or was I projecting, finding shadows where there was only light because everything had been cast in darkness by that text message? Stop following me. I opened a new document and started writing down questions. 1. Why no birth certificate in our files? 2. Stella versus Elizabeth. Family nickname or something else? 3. The little girl, approximately 6 years old. If Sarah had a child before we met, where was she during our marriage? 4. The husband. Who is he? How long have they been together? 5. The accident. Did I actually identify Sarah's body or just assume? 6. The text message. How did she get my number if she's been dead for 5 months? That last question stopped me cold. My number. She had my number, which meant either she'd kept it all this time, which suggested premeditation, or she'd obtained it somehow in the last 2 days, which suggested she'd been tracking me as carefully as I'd been tracking her. Unless she'd always had it. Unless it had never been gone in the first place. I pulled up my phone records, thank God for online account access, and scrolled back through 5 months of calls and texts. Nothing unusual, nothing from unknown numbers except the occasional spam call. I went back further to the days before the accident, looking for patterns or anomalies. March 6th, 2023. The day before Sarah died, or the day before I thought she died. Our call log showed 3 calls between us. 9:47 a.m., 12:23 p.m., and 6:15 p.m. The last call had lasted 4 minutes. I tried to remember what we talked about. Something mundane, probably. Dinner plans, a reminder to pick up milk, the 1,000 tiny negotiations of married life. But I couldn't remember. The detail had been lost in the trauma of what came next. March 7th, 2023. The accident. According to the police report, the summary version Detective Morrison had given me, the call came at 7:43 p.m. Single vehicle collision on Route 47. Rainy conditions. Vehicle crossed the center line and struck an oncoming car. Driver pronounced dead at the scene. I'd been at home working late on a client report, actually, because we had a deadline and I'd been behind. The knock on the door came at 9:17 p.m. 2 uniformed officers with expressions that told me everything before they said a word. Mr. Chen, Michael Chen, may we come in? The rest was a blur of formal condolences and terrible questions. Did my wife have any distinguishing marks, scars, tattoos, birthmarks? I'd mentioned the scar on her thumb, the small mole near her left ear. They'd nodded, made notes, asked me to come to the morgue the next day for formal identification. but I hadn't gone the next day. I'd put it off because I couldn't face it, couldn't bear to see Sarah reduced to a body on a table. And they'd been understanding, patient, had finally said I could identify her at the funeral home instead before the embalming, just her hand through a small viewing window because the facial trauma had been severe. Severe enough that the casket had been closed. Severe enough that I'd never actually seen her face. I pulled up the funeral home's information and stared at the number for 10 full minutes before calling. It rang 4 times before someone answered. A woman's voice, professionally sympathetic, asking how she could help me. My name is Michael Chen. My wife's funeral was handled by your facility in March. Sarah Morrison. Oh, Mr. Chen, yes, I remember. I'm so sorry for your loss. How can I help you today? I need to ask some questions about the identification process, the viewing before the funeral. A pause. Of course. What would you like to know? I only saw her hand.
Is that standard procedure for cases with facial trauma?
Another pause. Longer this time. Mr. Chen, I'm not sure I understand. You were present for the full viewing. You spent approximately 15 minutes with your wife's body before the service. The kitchen tilted sideways. I gripped the edge of the table. No, I saw her hand through a window, just her hand. They said the facial injuries were too severe. Sir, I was there. I assisted with the arrangement personally. You requested a private viewing before the family arrived. You were alone with the deceased for 15 minutes. You touched her face. You said goodbye. I stepped out to give you privacy, but I could see through the door. You were definitely there. That's not possible. I would remember Mr. Chen. Her voice had gone gentle, the tone people use with the fragile and confused. Grief affects memory. It's not uncommon for people to block out traumatic experiences, but I assure you, you had a full viewing. Your wife's face was visible. The injuries weren't to her face at all. They were primarily to her torso and lower body. Her face was peaceful. You commented on that. You said she looked like she was sleeping. I hung up. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely set the phone down. The kitchen spun around me in slow, nauseating circles. Either the funeral home director was lying or my memory of the most traumatic day of my life was completely false. Except it wasn't a memory. Not really. It was more like a placeholder, a fuzzy reconstruction of events that I'd pieced together from fragments and shock and the protective dissociation that had carried me through those first terrible weeks. Had I seen her face? Had I stood in a quiet room and looked at my dead wife and touched her cheek and said goodbye? The memory felt like fog, impossible to grasp. I could remember the funeral home's lobby, cream walls, soft lighting, a box of tissues on every surface. I could remember walking down a hallway, but after that everything dissolved into static. Maybe I had seen her. Maybe grief had erased the memory because it was too painful to keep. Or maybe I'd seen someone who looked enough like Sarah that I hadn't questioned it. I pulled out my laptop and started searching. Facial recognition accuracy, identifying deceased loved ones, morgue identification procedures. The results were overwhelming and horrifying. Misidentifications happened more often than people thought, especially in traumatic cases where families were in shock. Sometimes people saw what they expected to see rather than what was actually there. But the scar, the mole, those were specific details identifying marks that I'd confirm. Unless Sarah had a twin or a sister, or I stopped, went back to my wedding photos, found the ones with Sarah's family, Carol and Richard Morrison, Jennifer, an uncle whose name I couldn't remember, a cousin who'd given a toast at the reception, but no other siblings. Jennifer had always been described as Sarah's only sister. I called Jennifer. She answered on the first ring. Michael, if this is about yesterday, did Sarah have any other siblings? Anyone your parents didn't mention? Silence. Then what? No, it was just the two of us. Why are you asking me this? I need you to be completely honest with me. Were there any family secrets? Any relatives your parents kept hidden? Maybe from a previous marriage or...
Michael, stop. You're spiraling. This obsession isn't healthy.
Please, Jennifer, just answer the question. She sighed, and I could hear the exhaustion in it. No, there were no secret siblings, no hidden relatives. Mom and Dad were married 40 years before Dad passed. They had 2 daughters, Sarah and me. That's it. That's the whole boring, normal family tree. And you're sure Sarah never had a child before we met? For God's sake, Michael. Yes, I'm sure. I would know if my sister had gotten pregnant. We talked about everything. Everything. She would have told me unless she couldn't tell you, unless there was a reason to keep it secret. There was no secret child. Her voice rose sharp with frustration and grief. Sarah was 26 when you met her.
She'd been working at that cafe for 2 years, living in a studio apartment, barely making rent.
Where exactly would she have hidden a 4-year-old? How would she have paid for childcare on a barista's salary? Think about the logistics, Michael. Your theory doesn't make sense. She was right. The logistics didn't make sense. Unless Sarah had given up the child for adoption, or unless someone else had been raising her, or unless I'm going to the police tomorrow, I said. Detective Morrison is pulling the full accident report for me. Good. Maybe that will give you closure. Maybe seeing everything officially documented will help you accept that Sarah is gone. Or maybe it will prove I'm right. Jennifer made a sound that was half sob, half laugh. And if you're wrong, if you go down to the station and they confirm what I've been telling you, that Sarah is dead, that you're chasing ghosts, will you finally get help? Yes, I lied. After we hung up, I sat in the kitchen as afternoon faded to evening. As the shadows grew long and the house filled with the particular silence of Sunday spent alone, I thought about calling my own therapist. I'd been seeing Dr. Reeves for 3 months now, working through the stages of grief. But what would I say? That I'd been stalking a woman who looked like my dead wife? That I'd received a threatening text from her? That I was beginning to suspect my entire marriage had been built on lies? Doctor. Reeves would increase my medication, maybe recommend inpatient treatment. She meant well, but she operated from the assumption that Sarah was dead, that my grief was normal, that healing meant accepting loss and moving forward. But what if the loss itself was a lie? I ordered pizza I didn't eat and spent the evening going through Sarah's social media accounts, the ones I'd memorialized after her death, turning her Facebook and Instagram into digital shrines that friends could visit to share memories and condolences. I scrolled back through years of posts, photos of us together, smiling at the camera. Sarah with Jennifer at some bar, drinks raised in a toast. Sarah at the beach, at a concert, at Christmas with her family. Normal life, normal photos, nothing suspicious or strange or suggesting she'd been living a double life. But I noticed something I'd never paid attention to before. Sarah rarely tagged herself in locations. She'd post photos but never include where they were taken, and her friend list was remarkably small, maybe 50 people total, most of whom were family or people from work. For someone who'd lived in the city for 6 years, that was unusual. Most people accumulated digital acquaintances like dust, friending coworkers and casual acquaintances and friends of friends until their lists numbered in the hundreds. Sarah's was curated, controlled, almost like she'd been careful about who could see her life. I clicked through her friends list, recognizing most of the names. Jennifer, her parents, coworkers from the garden, a few people from college whose names I vaguely remembered from stories. And then, near the bottom, a profile that made my heart skip. Rebecca Lawrence. The profile picture showed a woman with dark hair, maybe late 30s, smiling at the camera with a child in her lap. The child had pigtails. I clicked on the profile, but it was set to private. Only mutual friends could see posts. I checked our mutual friends, just Sarah. They weren't connected to anyone else in Sarah's network.
I took a screenshot of Rebecca Lawrence's profile picture and zoomed in on the child.
Dark hair, maybe 6 years old, wearing a purple dress. The same purple dress I'd seen on the little girl at 2847 Maple Grove Lane. My phone buzzed. Another text from the unknown number. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., Riverside Park, North Bench by the fountain. Come alone. I'll explain everything. I stared at the message, reading it over and over until the words lost meaning. She wanted to meet. The woman who'd threatened to call the police if I followed her now wanted to meet and explain everything. It was obviously a trap or a confrontation or some kind of setup that would end with me looking like the unhinged widower stalking innocent women. I texted back, "How do I know it's really you?" The response came immediately. "The coffee shop where we met. You said I had beautiful eyes. I said, you had terrible taste in coffee. You ordered it anyway, every day for 3 weeks just so you could see me smile." My vision blurred. Those were details I'd never told anyone. Private moments from the early days of our relationship, the kind of memories you keep locked away because they're too precious to share. Only Sarah would know those things, which meant Sarah was alive. And tomorrow, I'd finally get my answers. I didn't sleep Sunday night. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face. Sarah's face. My wife's face. The face I'd thought I'd never see again, except in photographs, in dreams, and the cruel tricks my grief-broken mind played on me in crowds. By 5 a.m., I gave up on sleep entirely and made coffee. The too acidic Colombian that she'd hated that I'd kept buying anyway because changing brands felt like admitting she was really gone. Now I stood at the kitchen counter watching the sun rise through the window and wondered what admission I'd be making in 5 hours when I sat down on a park bench to meet my dead wife. I showered, shaved, put on clothes that I changed 3 times because nothing felt right for this moment. What do you wear to meet a ghost? What's the appropriate outfit for a conversation that might prove you're either completely sane or utterly deranged? I settled on jeans and a blue button-down. The shirt Sarah had always said brought out my eyes. Then I felt ridiculous for choosing it, for caring what I looked like, for treating this like some kind of date instead of a confrontation with a woman who'd let me believe she was dead for 5 months. 5 months of hell. 5 months of waking up, reaching for her. 5 months of cooking dinner for 2 and then staring at the extra plate until I threw it away uneaten. 5 months of people telling me it would get easier. That time healed all wounds, that I'd learned to live with the loss. Except there was no loss. Just a lie. By 8 a.m. I was in my car, too early to head to the park, but I couldn't stay in that house anymore, surrounded by artifacts of a marriage that might have been fiction from the start. I drove aimlessly through the city watching it wake up, commuters grabbing coffee, parents walking kids to school, the ordinary machinery of life grinding forward. While mine had been suspended in amber for 5 months, preserved in grief like an insect trapped in tree sap. At 9:15, I parked 3 blocks from Riverside Park and walked. The morning was crisp and bright, the kind of September day that makes you believe in fresh starts and new beginnings. Joggers passed me on the path. A woman threw a tennis ball for a golden retriever who bounded after it with pure, uncomplicated joy. I envied that dog. I envied everyone whose biggest problem was getting enough exercise or making it to work on time. The fountain was in the center of the park, a tired old thing that had probably been impressive in the 1960s, but now just wheezed and sputtered water in vaguely artistic patterns. The north bench sat 20 feet away, partially shaded by a massive willow tree whose branches hung like a curtain, creating a pocket of privacy in the public space. She was already there. Even from a distance, even with her back to me, I knew it was her. The slope of her shoulders, the way she sat with her hands folded in her lap, perfectly still in a way that most people never achieved. Sarah had always been able to be still. It was one of the things I'd loved about her, that she could sit in comfortable silence,
that she didn't need to fill every moment with noise. I approached slowly, my heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. She didn't turn around, but I saw her shoulders tense. She knew I was there. I sat down on the bench, leaving 2 feet of space between us. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. We just sat there. 2 people who'd promised to love each other until death did us part, separated by a chasm wider than the small distance between us. Finally, she turned to look at me. It was her. It was absolutely, undeniably.
Same eyes, that particular shade of hazel that shifted between green and brown depending on the light. Same small scar on her chin from a childhood bike accident. Same tiny mole near her left ear. Same face I'd kissed 1,000 times, seen across the breakfast table every morning for 3 years. Watch smile and laugh and cry and sleep. "Hello, Michael," she said softly. Her voice broke something in me. I'd been holding myself together through sheer force of will, but hearing her say my name, the exact inflection she'd always used, that particular warmth that had made me feel seen and known and loved, it shattered the dam I'd built. "You're alive," I said, and my voice came out strangled. "You're actually alive." "Yes, Sarah." "Don't." She held up a hand. "Please let me explain before you say anything else. I owe you that much." I wanted to scream at her. I wanted to grab her and shake her and demand to know how she could do this, how she could put me through 5 months of agony while she played house with another family. But I also wanted to touch her to confirm she was solid and real and not another grief-induced hallucination. So I sat silent and waited. She took a breath, and I watched her gather herself the way she always did before difficult conversations. Shoulders back, chin up, that determined set to her jaw that said she was going to push through no matter how hard it got. "My name isn't Sarah Morrison," she said. "It's Rebecca Lawrence. The woman who died in that accident. The woman you buried was my twin sister, Sarah, the real Sarah." The world tilted. The fountain's burbling became too loud, then too quiet. I couldn't breathe properly. "Twin," I repeated numbly. "Identical twin. Our parents separated us when we were 6 months old." Her voice was steady, but her hands were shaking in her lap. Mom took Sarah. Dad took me. We grew up on opposite sides of the country, not knowing about each other until 3 years ago when I hired a private investigator to find my birth family. 3 years ago? Yes, right before I met you. The timeline clicked into place with sickening clarity. October 2016. She, Rebecca, had been working at the Garden Cafe. We'd flirted over coffee. I'd asked her out. She'd said yes, and all along she'd been pretending to be someone she wasn't. "So our entire relationship," I said slowly, "our entire marriage, it was all based on you pretending to be your sister?" "No." She turned to face me fully now, and there were tears in her eyes. "Michael, you have to understand. When I found Sarah, when I finally met her, it was supposed to be a happy reunion. Long-lost twins finally together. But Sarah, she was in trouble." "What kind of trouble?" Rebecca wiped at her eye. "She'd gotten involved with a man, Marcus Webb, the college student who supposedly survived the accident. That wasn't random. He was her boyfriend. Abusive, controlling. She'd been trying to leave him for months, but he wouldn't let go. He threatened to kill her if she left. Said he'd make it look like an accident. Marcus Webb. The name from the police report, the other driver. So she ran," Rebecca continued. "She came to me, her secret twin sister that no one else knew about, and she asked me to help her disappear. She was desperate, Michael, terrified. She had a daughter from a previous relationship, a little girl named Emma,
who Marcus didn't know about because Sarah had given her up for adoption when she was born. But she'd stayed in touch with the adoptive parents. She'd been part of Emma's life secretly, and she was terrified that if Marcus found out, he'd use Emma to control her. My head was spinning. So the accident was staged. Sarah faked her death to escape Marcus. We switched places. She took my identity. Rebecca Lawrence and I became Sarah Morrison. The plan was temporary, just long enough for Marcus to believe she was dead, long enough for him to move on. Then we'd switch back and I'd go back to my life. But you didn't switch back. Her face crumpled. No, because I met you and God helped me. I fell in love with you. I stood up. I couldn't sit anymore, couldn't be that close to her. While processing what she was telling me, you fell in love with me while pretending to be someone else, while lying to me every single day for 3 years? I know it was wrong. I tried to tell you so many times, I almost told you, but how do you explain something like that? How do you tell someone that your entire identity is borrowed? That you're living your twin sister's life while she lives yours. You just tell them. My voice rose loud enough that a jogger glanced our way nervously. I lowered it. You sit them down and you tell them the truth. You don't let them propose to you. You don't marry them under a false name. You don't build a life on lies. I was going to tell you before the wedding, but then Sarah called me crying, saying Marcus had found her, that he'd tracked her down somehow. She begged me to keep up the charade, to stay Sarah Morrison a little longer, just until she could disappear properly, and God, I was weak. I loved you too much to risk losing you. I paced in front of the bench, my hands in my hair. So March, the accident. What really happened? Rebecca's voice dropped to almost a whisper. Sarah called me that night. Said Marcus had found her again. Said he was going to kill her. I told her to go to the police, but she was too scared. She said she had a plan that she'd make it look like I'd died in a car accident. That way she could take back her old identity and live freely while I took hers. So, she killed herself. She committed suicide and made it look like an accident. No, Michael. Sarah didn't die that night. Rebecca looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. I did. Or at least Rebecca Lawrence died. Sarah staged the accident using a body she'd obtained. I don't know how. I don't want to know how. And she switched out our identification. When the police came to your door, they came to tell you that your wife Sarah had died, but the body in the morgue was identified as me, Rebecca Lawrence. My husband David, the man you saw at the house, he's been mourning his wife while living with Sarah. My legs gave out. I sat back down on the bench hard enough to hurt. You're telling me there was no accident, no one died. Someone died, just not either of us. I don't know who. Sarah handled all that. She said it was better if I didn't know the details. And you didn't question it. You didn't think maybe your sister had crossed a line from fleeing abuse to committing actual crimes? Of course I questioned it, but she'd already done it. The body was already in the morgue, already identified, already being processed through the system. What was I supposed to do? Go to the police and say my twin sister had faked her death using an unknown corpse? They'd have arrested both of us. I felt sick, actually physically sick. So for 5 months, you've let me believe my wife was dead. You've let me grieve and suffer and fall apart. And all along you were alive, living in my house, sleeping in our bed. No. She shook her head violently. Michael, I couldn't stay. Don't you see? Once Sarah took my place as Rebecca Lawrence, I couldn't be Sarah Morrison anymore. If I'd stayed with you, someone might have noticed, might have realized we'd switched. So I had to disappear too. Where did you go? Nowhere. Everywhere. I stayed with friends in different cities, used cash, avoided cameras. I've been in hiding just like Sarah, except she got to keep her daughter and her husband. And I lost everything. I lost you. The tears were flowing freely down her face now, but I felt nothing. Just a vast, empty numbness spreading through my chest. "The funeral," I said. "You were at the funeral in the back watching. I had to see you one last time. I had to say goodbye."
And you couldn't tell me then? You couldn't pull me aside and explain how? With everyone there, with your family and mine, Sarah's family, all watching, it would have destroyed everything, would have exposed Sarah's plan.
I laughed, a bitter sound that startled a nearby pigeon. Her plan. Her plan that involved identity theft and fraud and probably a dozen other crimes I can't even name. Her plan that destroyed my life. "I'm sorry." Rebecca reached for my hand, but I pulled away.
Michael, I am so sorry. If I could go back and do things differently, you'd what? Tell me the truth from the beginning or just execute the con more carefully? She flinched. It wasn't a con. My feelings for you were real. Are real. Everything we had together, that was real. No. I stood up again, putting distance between us. Real things are built on truth. What we had was built on lies. You're not even the person I thought I married. Your name isn't Sarah. Your history isn't what you told me. Your family, God, Jennifer. Does she know? No. No one knows except me and Sarah. So Jennifer's been grieving her sister this whole time, and that sister is alive and well and playing happy families with my identity, Rebecca's identity. Whatever. I know it's complicated. Complicated? I laughed again, and it hurt. Complicated is forgetting to mention you have a student loan. Complicated is not telling your partner you're allergic to shellfish until after the wedding. This is beyond complicated. This is criminal. This is insane. Rebecca stood too, her hands clasped together like she was praying. Michael, please. I came here to explain, to try to make you understand. Sarah and we were trapped in an impossible situation. We made the best choices we could with the options we had. And what about me? What about my choices? I didn't choose to marry a woman pretending to be someone else. I didn't choose to grieve a death that never happened. I didn't choose any of this. I know, and I'm sorry. But I need you to understand I love you. I have always loved you. The person you fell in love with, the woman you married, that was me, Rebecca, not Sarah. Me. The love was real, even if the name wasn't. I looked at her. This woman who wore my wife's face but wasn't my wife, who shared my bed and my life while hiding behind her sister's identity. I wanted to feel something. Anger, betrayal, heartbreak, something. But all I felt was exhausted. Where is she? I asked. Where is the real Sarah? I can't tell you that. Can't or won't, both. It's safer for everyone if you don't know. Safer for everyone or safer for you and your sister? She didn't answer. I pulled out my phone and opened the photo I'd taken at the organic market. This is her, isn't it? The real Sarah Morrison, living as Rebecca Lawrence at 2847 Maple Grove Lane with a husband named David and a daughter named Emma. Rebecca's face went pale. You followed her? You're damn right I followed her. I thought I was following my dead wife. Turns out I was following my wife's secret twin sister, pretending to be someone else. Again. Michael, you can't expose this. If you go to the police, if you tell anyone, Sarah will be in danger. Marcus is still out there. He still thinks she's dead. If he finds out she's alive, then maybe Sarah should have thought of that before committing fraud and faking her death. My voice echoed across the park. Several people looked our way. Rebecca glanced around nervously. Please, she whispered. Please just give me time to figure this out, to make it right. How exactly do you make this right?
You can't unfake a death. You can't undo 5 months of grief. You can't give me back the life I lost. No. But I can tell you the truth. All of it. Everything Sarah did. Everything I know. Just not here. Not now. Meet me tomorrow. Same time, same place. I'll bring proof, documents, everything you need to understand the full story.
I looked at her. This woman who'd lied so thoroughly that I didn't even know what was real anymore. Why should I believe anything you say? Because despite everything, despite all the lies and the pain I've caused, I still love you. And I think you still love me too. Not Sarah. Me. Rebecca. The woman who actually married you. She was right. And that was the worst part. Standing there looking at her face, hearing her voice, watching the way she twisted her hands when she was nervous, I still felt it. That pull, that connection. The same feeling that had made me propose after 6 months because I couldn't imagine a future without her. Except now, I didn't know who her was. Tomorrow, I said finally. 10 a.m. But Rebecca, if you're lying to me again, if any of this is another con, I'm going straight to the police with everything I know. She nodded, relief flooding her features. Thank you. Thank you, Michael. I walked away without saying goodbye, leaving her standing by the fountain in Riverside Park. A ghost made flesh. A wife who wasn't my wife. A stranger wearing a face I'd loved. And I still didn't know what the truth was. But tomorrow I'd find out. I didn't go home after leaving the park. I couldn't. The house felt contaminated now. Every surface touched by lies, every room haunted by a woman who never really existed. Instead, I drove to the police station and sat in the parking lot for 45 minutes, my hand on the door handle, trying to decide whether to walk in and report everything or wait until I had Rebecca's promised proof. The problem was, I didn't know what I'd be reporting. Identity fraud, faking a death, conspiracy to commit what exactly? And who was the victim here? Me, obviously, but also David, the man who thought he was married to Rebecca Lawrence, but was actually living with Sarah Morrison. And what about Emma, the 6-year-old caught in the middle of this mess, being raised by a mother using a stolen identity? My phone buzzed, a text from Detective Morrison. Accident file ready. Can you come in today instead of tomorrow? Something came up and I'll be out Tuesday. I stared at the message, then at the station entrance 50 feet away. A sign, maybe the universe, pushing me toward answers. I texted back, "Be there in 5 minutes." Detective Morrison looked older than I remembered, or maybe I'd just stopped paying attention to details that didn't directly relate to my grief. He was maybe 55, with gray hair and tired eyes that had seen too much of humanity's worst moments. When I walked into his office, he stood and shook my hand with genuine sympathy. "Michael, good to see you, though I wish the circumstances were different. Have a seat." His office was standard cop issue, metal desk, filing cabinets, a dying plant in the corner that someone had given up watering months ago. On the desk sat a manila folder thick with papers, the accident file. "I pulled everything we have on your wife's case," Morrison said, settling back into his chair. "Traffic report, witness statements, medical examiner's findings, photos from the scene. I have to warn you, some of this is pretty graphic. Are you sure you want to see it?" "Yes." My voice was steady. "I need to see everything." He pushed the folder across the desk. "Take your time. I'll be right outside if you have questions." After he left, I sat alone in that depressing office and opened the file. The first page was the initial police report typed in that bureaucratic language law enforcement uses to describe tragedy. At approximately 1943 hours on March 7, 2023, units responded to a single vehicle collision on Route 47 northbound, mile marker 23. Vehicle identified as 2019 Toyota Corolla, registered to Sarah E. Morrison.
Driver pronounced deceased at scene.
Vehicle had crossed centerline and collided with southbound 2021 Honda Accord, operated by Marcus Webb, age 22.
Marcus Webb, the name Rebecca had mentioned, Sarah's abusive boyfriend. I flipped through pages of measurements and diagrams showing skid marks, point of impact, final resting positions of both vehicles. Then I found the witness statements. There had been 2 witnesses, a truck driver named George Patterson who'd been traveling northbound several cars behind Sarah's Corolla. His statement was brief. I saw the Toyota swerve like she was avoiding something, maybe an animal. Then she overcorrected and crossed into the other lane. The Honda didn't have time to brake. Terrible crash. I called 911 immediately. The second witness was Marcus Webb himself, the driver of the Honda. His statement was longer, more detailed, and something about it made my skin crawl. I was driving home from my evening class when this car came straight at me. The driver looked right at me before impact, like she was aiming for me on purpose. I tried to swerve, but there wasn't time. The crash was severe. I got out of my car, pretty shaken up, but okay, and went to check on the other driver. The door was jammed. I could see through the window that she wasn't moving. There was a lot of blood. I called 911 and waited with her until paramedics arrived, but I could tell she was already gone. Looked right at me before impact like she was aiming for me on purpose. I read that line 3 times. It could be shocking, the traumatized interpretation of a young man who's just survived a horrible accident. Or it could be something else. A clue. Evidence that Sarah, the real Sarah, had orchestrated this crash deliberately, using Marcus as an unwitting participant in her stage death. But if that was true, whose body had been in the car? I flipped to the medical examiner's report, my hands shaking. Victim, female, Caucasian, approximately 30 years of age, 56, 130 plumps. Identification based on driver's license found at scene and personal effects. Cause of death, blunt force trauma to head and chest consistent with motor vehicle collision. Time of death estimated between 1930 and 1945 hours. Notable identifying marks. Small scar on left thumb. Mole near left ear. Dental records requested for confirmation, but not necessary given clear physical identification by family member. Family member. That was me. I'd identified the body based on the scar and the mole. Sarah's distinguishing features that Rebecca shared because they were identical twins, but I'd never seen dental records. The ME had requested them but deemed them unnecessary. Why? Because I'd confirmed the identification. Because someone had told them the family was satisfied and further confirmation would be unnecessarily traumatic. I kept reading, looking for any mention of dental records being compared. Nothing. The ME had closed the case based on visual identification alone. My heart was pounding now. I flipped to the photo section and immediately wished I hadn't. The first image showed the crash scene from a distance. 2 crumpled vehicles, emergency lights painting everything in red and blue, debris scattered across wet asphalt. The next photo was closer. Sarah's Corolla driver's side crushed, windshield shattered, the entire front end accordioned from the impact. Then came the photos of the body. I forced myself to look. The victim was slumped in the driver's seat, held in place by the seatbelt. There was blood. So much blood. But the face was visible, partially obscured by deployed airbag and trauma, but visible. It looked like Sarah. Same facial structure, same hair color and length, but something was off. The nose looked slightly different. The chin seemed sharper. Or maybe I was seeing differences that weren't there because I was looking for them, because I desperately needed there to be differences. I pulled out my phone and opened my photo album, found a close-up of Sarah, of Rebecca pretending to be Sarah, and held it next to the morgue photo. The faces were similar, incredibly similar, but not identical. The woman in the morgue photo had a slightly wider nose. Her eyebrows were shaped differently. And there, on her left hand, visible in one of the photos, I could see her thumb. No scar. I zoomed in on the image until it pixelated, but I was sure the distinctive scar that both Sarah and Rebecca had from their childhood, the scar I'd used to identify my wife's body, wasn't there. Which meant the woman who died in that car wasn't Sarah Morrison and wasn't Rebecca Lawrence. It was someone else entirely. I sat back in the chair, my mind racing. Sarah had staged an accident using another woman's body, a woman who looked similar enough to pass a cursory visual identification, but who wasn't actually either twin. She'd planted identification, positioned the body in her car, and somehow orchestrated a collision with Marcus Webb that would look accidental, but ensure the body was damaged enough that detailed examination wouldn't be required. And it had worked. The medical examiner had accepted my identification without requesting dental records. The police had closed the case as a tragic accident. Insurance had paid out. God, had I received life insurance money for a woman who wasn't actually dead? I flipped through more pages until I found the insurance section. Yes, $500,000 in life insurance paid out 6 weeks after the accident. I'd put it in a savings account and hadn't touched it. Couldn't touch it because spending that money felt like profiting from Sarah's death. Except she wasn't dead, and that money was proceeds from fraud. I was an accomplice without knowing it. A victim who'd been turned into a criminal by accepting payment for a death that never happened. Find what you needed. Detective Morrison had returned carrying 2 cups of coffee. He set one in front of me and settled back into his chair, studying my face with cop eyes that miss nothing. You look like you've seen a ghost. Maybe I have. I closed the file, my hand resting on top of it. Detective. This identification, you said it was based on my confirmation at the funeral home. That's right. You identified the body based on distinguishing marks. The scar on the thumb and the mole near the ear. But what about dental records? The Me requested them. Morrison frowned slightly. They were deemed unnecessary. You'd made a positive ID, and given the trauma you were experiencing, we didn't want to prolong the process. Why? Is there a problem? I need to see those dental records. Michael, please, I need to see them. Compare them to Sarah's dental records. Can you do that? Morrison's frown deepened. What's going on? Has something happened to make you question the identification? I could tell him right now. I could open my mouth and explain everything. The twin sister, the staged accident, the body that wasn't who we thought it was. But Rebecca's words echoed in my head. If you expose this, Sarah will be in danger. Marcus is still out there. Marcus Webb, who'd been the other driver. Marcus Webb, who Sarah had been fleeing from. Marcus Webb, who might have been the target of this elaborate scheme all along. I just need to be sure, I said carefully. For closure. Can you request the dental comparison? Morrison studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. I can make the request, but Michael, it's going to take time. We'd need to get Sarah's dental records from her dentist, then compare them to the ME's findings. Could be a week, maybe 2. And I have to ask, are you prepared for what we might find or what we might not find? I'm prepared. I wasn't prepared, not even close. But I needed the truth, whatever it was. After leaving the station, I drove aimlessly again, my mind spinning with the implications of what I discovered. The woman in the morgue wasn't Sarah, which meant Sarah, the real Sarah Morrison, had somehow obtained a body that looked similar enough to fool investigators. Where do you even get a body? Morgue theft? A homeless woman no one would miss. Someone who died naturally and whose death Sarah had exploited. The possibilities were all horrifying. I found myself parked outside the Garden Cafe, the place where this whole mess had started 7 years ago. It looked the same brick facade, same hand-painted sign, same sense of cozy warmth that had drawn me in that first October morning when I'd been looking for coffee and found something else entirely? Or had I found Rebecca and I fallen in love with her, not knowing she was pretending to be her twin sister? Or had Sarah worked there first and Rebecca had taken over her shift at some point, and I'd been too oblivious to notice the switch? I walked inside. The afternoon crowd was thin, a few students with laptops, an elderly couple sharing a muffin, a woman reading a paperback in the corner. Behind the counter, a young man with a beard and too many tattoos took orders with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd made 10,000 lattes. I didn't recognize him. All the staff from 7 years ago were long gone. "Help you?" he asked when I reached the counter. "I'm looking for information about someone who used to work here. Sarah Morrison, around 2016. His expression went carefully neutral. "Sorry, man. I've only been here 2 years. You could ask the manager, but I think she started in 2018. Dead end." Of course it was a dead end. What had I expected? That someone would remember one barista from 7 years ago and be able to tell me which twin had actually been working here? I ordered coffee I didn't want and sat at the same table where Sarah or Rebecca had first drawn that heart on my cup. Tried to remember every detail of our early courtship, looking for clues I'd missed. Had there been moments when she'd seemed uncertain about details of her life? Times when she'd had to check herself, correct a story, avoid questions about her past? Maybe. Or maybe I was retrofitting memories with significance they'd never had. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, but I knew who it was before I even opened it. "Rebecca, I know you went to the police. I know what you found in the accident file. We need to talk before you do anything else. Please." How did she know? Had she been following me? Was Detective Morrison somehow involved in this mess? Or was it simpler? Had she been monitoring the police database, somehow tracking when her sister's file was accessed? I texted back, "How did you get a body?" 3 dots appeared, pulsed, disappeared, then not over-X'd. "I'll explain everything. Tell me now, or I go back to the police and tell them everything." A longer pause this time. Then her name was Diana Walsh. She was homeless, died of an overdose. Sarah found her body and saw an opportunity. I know how that sounds. I know it's wrong, but she was desperate. I stared at the message, feeling sick. "You desecrated a corpse, stole a dead woman's body, and used it to fake your sister's death. We gave Diana something she never had in life, an identity, a funeral, people who mourned her. Is that really so terrible?" Yes, Rebecca, that's terrible. That's criminal. That's sociopathic, says the man who's been stalking women and taking pictures. We've all done things we're not proud of, Michael. The question is what we do now. I stood up, the coffee forgotten, and walked out of the garden, got in my car and drove to the one place I hadn't been yet. The cemetery where I'd buried a woman named Diana Walsh under Sarah Morrison's headstone. The groundskeeper was locking the main gate when I arrived, but he recognized me and let me through with a sympathetic nod. I walked to Sarah's plot, to Diana's plot, and stood looking at the granite headstone with its lies carved in stone. "I'm sorry," I said to the unknown woman beneath the grass. "I'm sorry they used you like this. I'm sorry you died alone and forgotten and ended up as a prop in someone else's escape plan." The cemetery was quiet except for birdsong and distant traffic. No answers came from the grave, just the weight of all the lies pressing down on me like earth. Tomorrow, Rebecca had promised to explain everything, to give me proof and documentation and the full truth of what had happened. But I was starting to realize that the truth was a moving target, that every answer spawned 10 new questions, that I might never reach the bottom of this deception. My phone buzzed again, another text from Rebecca. 10 a.m. tomorrow, Riverside Park. I'll bring everything, documents, photos, the full story of how this happened. And then you can decide what to do with the information. That's fair, right? I texted back. One question now. Did you ever actually love me, or was I just part of the cover story? The response came quickly. I loved you from the moment you ordered that terrible coffee just to see me smile. Everything else was a lie. But that was real. I swear to you, Michael, that was real. I sat in my car in the cemetery parking lot as dusk fell, reading and rereading those words, trying to decide if I believed them, and came up empty. I arrived at Riverside Park 30 minutes early Tuesday morning, driven by paranoia and the need to control at least one variable in a situation that had spiraled beyond all recognition. I wanted to see Rebecca arrive to make sure she wasn't setting me up to confirm she was coming alone and not bringing Marcus Webb or the police or whoever else might be entangled in this nightmare. The park was quieter on a Tuesday than it had been on Sunday. A few early morning joggers, a man doing Tai Chi by the fountain, no one paying attention to the guy sitting on a bench pretending to read news on his phone while actually watching every person who entered the park. At 9:45, I saw her. She came from the west entrance wearing jeans and a green jacket I recognized because I'd bought it for her for Sarah 2 Christmases ago. She carried a messenger bag that looked heavy, bulging with whatever proof she'd promised to bring. She walked with her head down, shoulders hunched like she was trying to make herself smaller, less visible. She sat on the north bench without looking around, set the bag beside her, and waited. I gave it another 5 minutes, watching for anyone following her, anyone who seemed too interested in a woman sitting alone by a fountain. Nothing. Just ordinary people going about their ordinary lives, oblivious to the extraordinary conversation about to happen. At exactly 10 a.m., I walked over and sat down beside her. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly. "Show me the proof." No pleasantries, no small talk. I was done with pretense. Rebecca nodded and pulled the messenger bag onto her lap. "I'm going to show you everything, but first you need to understand the context. You need to know who Sarah really was, who I really am, and how we ended up in this situation. I know who you are. You're the woman who lied to me for 3 years." She flinched, but didn't argue. Instead, she pulled out a photo album, an old-fashioned physical album, not digital. She opened it to the first page. "This is us," she said. "Sarah and me, 6 months old." The photo showed 2 babies in matching pink dresses held by a woman with tired eyes and a forced smile. The babies were identical, impossible to tell apart. Behind them stood a man separate from the group, his expression cold and distant. "Our parents," Rebecca continued, "Diane and Robert Lawrence. They split up when we were 6 months old. Mom took Sarah, Dad took me. Neither of them told us about the other twin. Dad changed my last name to his mother's maiden name, Lawrence, and moved us to California. Mom kept Sarah in Pennsylvania and gave her dad's surname, Morrison." She flipped through pages showing parallel childhoods. 2 little girls growing up on opposite coasts, wearing similar clothes, making similar faces, living separate lives that looked disturbingly identical. Even in their separateness, I didn't know I had a twin until 3 years ago. Rebecca said, "I'd always felt like something was missing, like there was a Sarah-shaped hole in my life, even though I didn't know anyone named Sarah. So when I turned 30, I hired a private investigator to look into my family history and found your sister. And found my sister. Living in Philadelphia, working as a barista, dating a man named Marcus Webb who was slowly destroying her." Rebecca pulled out another set of photos. These were recent, or recent-ish, printed from digital files showing a woman who looked exactly like the one sitting beside me. But the woman in these photos had bruises. A black eye in one shot, a split lip in another, defensive wounds on her arms. "Marcus was a psychology student," Rebecca said, her voice hardening. "He used everything he learned in his classes to manipulate her. Gaslighting, isolation, intermittent reinforcement, classic abuse tactics executed by someone who understood exactly what he was doing.
Sarah tried to leave him 4 times. 4 times he convinced her to come back. The last time he told her he'd kill her if she tried to leave again. And she believed him, because by that point, she knew he was capable of anything. I looked at the photos, at the evidence of systematic abuse, and felt my anger shift slightly. Not disappear. I was still furious at the lies, but shift to include Marcus Webb in its scope. She came to me for help, Rebecca continued. Showed up at my apartment in Los Angeles with nothing but a backpack and these photos. She was terrified, Michael, shaking and crying and convinced that Marcus would find her and kill her. So I helped her. I let her stay with me. We tried to figure out a legal solution, restraining order, police report, something. But Sarah was terrified of going to the police because Marcus had connections in the department. His uncle was a captain. She was convinced they wouldn't help her. So instead, you decided to fake her death. Not at first. At first, we just switched places for a while. I took a leave of absence from my job. I was a graphic designer, worked remotely most of the time anyway, and went to Philadelphia pretending to be Sarah. The plan was simple. I'd break up with Marcus for her, make it clean and final. Then Sarah would take back her life, and I'd go home to California. Rebecca pulled out more documents now. A lease agreement signed Sarah Morrison in handwriting that I recognized as Rebecca's. Bank statements, credit card bills, all showing the paper trail of Rebecca living Sarah's life in Philadelphia, while Sarah presumably hid in California. But Marcus didn't accept the breakup. Rebecca said he showed up at the apartment, at Sarah's apartment where I was staying, and he got violent, grabbed me, pushed me against the wall, told me I wasn't going anywhere. I managed to get away and called the police, but by the time they arrived, Marcus was gone. And when they filed the report, nothing happened. Just like Sarah had predicted, his uncle made it disappear. So you stayed, kept pretending to be Sarah. What choice did I have? I couldn't leave her apartment because Marcus was watching it. Couldn't go back to California because that would blow our cover. I was trapped in Philadelphia, living my sister's life, terrified that Marcus would figure out I wasn't really Sarah. She paused, pulled out a water bottle from her bag and took a long drink. Her hands were shaking. And then I met you, she said softly. 2 months into pretending to be Sarah, I was working her shift at the garden, and you walked in. You ordered coffee and smiled at me, and for the first time in 2 months, I felt like maybe everything would be okay. You didn't know Marcus, didn't know Sarah's history. You just saw me, saw who I really was, even though you didn't know you were seeing me. And I fell in love with you while pretending to be someone else. Yes, and I know that was wrong. I know I should have told you the truth from the beginning, but I was scared, Michael. Scared that if I told you about the twin switch, you'd run. Scared that you'd go to the police and they'd contact Marcus. Scared that I'd lose the first good thing that had happened to me in years. I wanted to stay angry, but her voice was breaking, and I could see tears tracking down her face. And despite everything, I still felt that pull toward her. 3 years of love doesn't evaporate just because you find out it was built on lies. What about Sarah? I asked. Where was she while you were falling in love with me? California? Living as Rebecca Lawrence, using my identity, starting over. She got a job at a tech company, made friends, started dating. She met David about 6 months after I met you, and then she found out about Emma. Her daughter Rebecca nodded. Sarah had gotten pregnant when she was 23 before Marcus. The father was a one-night stand who wanted nothing to do with the baby. Sarah was terrified of being a single mother, thought she couldn't handle it. So she gave Emma up for adoption, but she insisted on an open adoption. She wanted to know where Emma was, wanted to be part of her life, even if she couldn't raise her. Rebecca pulled out photos of a little girl, blonde, gap-toothed, smiling. Emma at age 2, 3, 4, 5, always with the same couple, a man and woman who looked at her with such obvious love that it hurt to see.
The adoptive parents were wonderful, Rebecca said. Tom and Lisa Murphy. They lived in Sacramento, sent Sarah photos every month, let her visit a few times a year. Emma knew Sarah as Aunt Sarah, a special friend who came to visit and brought presents. It was working. Emma had a stable home, loving parents, and Sarah got to watch her grow up from a distance. But then, you switched identities and Sarah couldn't be Aunt Sarah anymore. Exactly. If she showed up in Sacramento as Sarah Morrison, while Sarah Morrison was supposedly living in Philadelphia, someone might notice. The Murphys might ask questions. So Sarah stayed away from Emma for 2 years. 2 years of missing birthdays and holidays and all the little moments she'd cherished. It was killing her, Michael. She was desperate to see her daughter again. Rebecca's voice had taken on a pleading quality now, like she was trying to make me understand, to make me sympathize with her sister's choices. Then Tom Murphy died. She continued. Heart attack, completely unexpected. Lisa was devastated, and so was Emma. Sarah wanted to be there for them, wanted to comfort her daughter, but she couldn't do it as Sarah Morrison. So she started visiting them as Rebecca Lawrence instead. Told them she was a friend of Tom's from college, that she wanted to help, and Lisa, in her grief, accepted the help. Let the stranger into their lives because she needed the support. And eventually Sarah asked to adopt Emma. Not adopt, help raise her. Lisa was struggling as a single parent, working full-time and taking care of a grieving child. When Sarah, as Rebecca, offered to move closer to help out, Lisa said yes. Then when Sarah suggested making it official, having Rebecca become Emma's legal co-guardian, Lisa agreed to that too. She had no idea she was being manipulated by Emma's birth mother. The implications were staggering. Sarah had used her daughter's adoptive father's death as an opportunity to insert herself back into Emma's life under a false identity. It was calculated, manipulative, and deeply wrong. And David? I asked. Where does he fit? David Murphy, Tom's younger brother. He moved to Sacramento after Tom died to help Lisa with Emma. He and Sarah fell in love. Or Sarah fell in love with him and he fell in love with who he thought she was. They got married 8 months ago. Small ceremony, just Lisa and Emma and a few friends. Sarah finally had what she'd always wanted, her daughter in her life, a stable home, a man who loved her. All of it built on my identity. Rebecca pulled out a marriage certificate. Rebecca Ann Lawrence to David Thomas Murphy, dated February 14th, 2024. I stared at it. This legal document cementing my wife's sister's marriage to another man using my wife's identity. So where does Diana Walsh fit in? I asked. When did this go from identity fraud to desecrating corpses? Rebecca closed her eyes. Last November, Marcus found out about you and me. Someone from Philadelphia saw us together. I was visiting Sarah for Thanksgiving and posted a photo on social media. Marcus saw it, recognized Sarah, and started investigating. He found out about our marriage, about our life in Millbrook. He called me, told me he knew what we'd done, said he was going to expose everything unless Sarah came back to him. So, she decided to fake her death. We decided together, Sarah and me. We knew Marcus would never stop, would never let go, would keep threatening us forever unless he believed Sarah was really dead. So we came up with a plan. Sarah found Diana Walsh, a homeless woman who died of an overdose in Sacramento. Sarah worked at the morgue part-time as a cleaner, had access to bodies before they were processed. She saw Diana come in, saw that she looked similar enough to pass, and she took the body. I felt bile rise in my throat. She stole a body from the morgue. She borrowed it. We were going to return it after the funeral, make sure Diana got a proper burial. But things got complicated. Complicated how? Rebecca pulled out the final piece of evidence, a police report dated March 7th, 2023, the same date as the accident. But this report was from Sacramento, not Millbrook. It documented the theft of a body from the county morgue, reported by the night supervisor when he'd done his inventory check. They discovered Diana was missing the same night of the accident. Rebecca said, "Started an investigation. If we'd returned the body, they'd have connected it to the crash. So we had to let her stay buried as Sarah Morrison. Let Diana finally have an identity, a gravestone, people who mourned her. It's not what we planned, but maybe it's what Diana deserved." I stood up, unable to sit anymore, unable to be this close to Rebecca while processing what she was telling me. "You're trying to make this sound noble, like you gave Diana Walsh some kind of gift, but you didn't. You used her. You used her body to perpetrate fraud, to fake a death, to escape consequences of your own choices." "I know." Rebecca stood too, the messenger bag clutched to her chest. "I know it was wrong, but Michael, what were we supposed to do? Marcus was threatening us. Sarah had finally found happiness with her daughter and David. I had built a life with you. We were trapped." "So you trapped me instead. Made me identify a stranger's body as my wife. Made me grieve for 5 months. Made me an unwitting accomplice to multiple felonies. I'm sorry. God, Michael, I am so sorry. If I could go back and do things differently, you'd what? Tell me the truth from the beginning, or just execute the plan better so I never found out?" She didn't answer. I pulled out my phone and opened the photo I'd taken at the organic market. Sarah with Emma and David playing happy families. What about them? Do and Lisa know the truth? No. David thinks he's married to Rebecca Lawrence, a graphic designer from Los Angeles who lost her parents young and has no other family. Lisa thinks Rebecca is a generous friend who stepped up to help raise Emma after Tom died. They have no idea. So when I expose this, when I go to the police with everything you've told me, their lives get destroyed too. Emma loses another parent. David finds out his marriage is a lie. Lisa discovers she's been manipulated into giving Emma's birth other access to her daughter. Yes, Rebecca's voice was barely a whisper. All of that happens. Plus, Sarah goes to prison for fraud and body theft and probably a dozen other charges. Marcus wins. He doesn't get Sarah, but he gets the satisfaction of destroying her life. And you and I? Whatever we had, whatever we could have had, it ends forever. She stepped closer to me, and I saw desperation in her eyes, the same desperate fear I'd seen on the faces in those abuse photos, the same terror that had driven 2 sisters to make catastrophic choices. "I'm not asking you to forgive me," she said. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I'm asking you to think about what happens next to everyone, to Emma, who's 6 years old and innocent in all of this, to Diana Walsh, whose body deserves to rest in peace instead of being exhumed and examined and turned into evidence, to Sarah, who made terrible choices, but only because she was trying to escape an abuser, and to us, Michael, to what we had. What we had was built on lies. The foundation was lies, but the love was real. Every morning I woke up next to you. Every dinner we shared, every conversation and laugh and quiet moment. That was real. Rebecca loved Michael, even if you didn't know Rebecca was the one you were loving. My phone buzzed, a text from Detective Morrison. Dental records retrieved. Setting up comparison with me finding should have results by end of week. By end of week, the truth would be official. The body in Sarah Morrison's grave wasn't Sarah Morrison. The investigation would reopen, questions would be asked, and either I'd be ready with answers, or I'd be trapped in the lies along with everyone else. "What do you want from me?" I asked Rebecca. "What outcome are you hoping for here?" "I want you to let it go," she said. "I want you to tell Detective Morrison you've changed your mind about the dental records, that you're satisfied with the original identification. I want you to walk away from this knowing the truth but not sharing it. Let Sarah live her life with David and Emma. Let Diana rest in peace. Let me disappear again into whatever identity I build next. And you? You go on with your life. Find someone new, someone honest, someone who won't hurt you the way I did. And Marcus believes Sarah is dead, has moved on, got married himself last month to a girl from his grad program. He's out of our lives forever. I looked at her. This woman who wore my wife's face and carried her sister's secrets and wanted me to become complicit in crimes I hadn't committed. And I thought about Emma, 6 years old, laughing in her mother's arms in that photo from the organic market. I thought about David Murphy, who'd lost his brother and found love with a woman who didn't exist. I thought about Lisa Murphy, trying to raise her daughter while grieving her husband, grateful for help from a stranger who wasn't strange at all. I thought about Diana Walsh, alone and forgotten in life, given an identity and mourners and death. And I thought about myself standing in a park on a Tuesday morning, holding evidence of multiple felonies, trying to decide between justice and mercy. "I need time," I said finally. "I need to think about this." "How much time?" "I don't know. A week, maybe more." Rebecca nodded slowly. "Okay, but Michael, the dental records. You need to stop that comparison. Once they officially confirm the body isn't Sarah Morrison, you can't undo it. The investigation reopens whether you wanted to or not." She was right. I had maybe 3 days before Detective Morrison called with results that would trigger an unstoppable chain of events. 3 days to decide whether to seek justice or grant mercy. 3 days to choose who I wanted to be. I called Detective Morrison from my car, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone twice before the call connected. "Michael, good timing," he said. "I was just about to reach out. We've got the dental records from Dr. Patterson, Sarah's dentist, sending them to me this afternoon for comparison." "Don't." The word came out too sharp, too desperate. I forced myself to slow down. I've been thinking about it, and I don't want to put Sarah through that, even posthumously. It feels like a violation. Silence on the other end. Then, "Michael, yesterday you were insistent about seeing those records. What changed?" "Everything. Nothing. The truth that made me wish I'd never asked questions in the first place. I had a dream about her. I lied and hated how easily the falsehood came. She was angry that I was digging into this, angry that I couldn't let her rest. I know it sounds crazy, but I can't shake the feeling that I should just let this go." More silence. Detective Morrison was a cop trained to spot lies, and I was a terrible liar even on my best days. "Michael, if something's going on, if someone's threatened you or pressured you..." "No, nothing like that. I need to accept that Sarah's gone and move forward. The dental comparison won't bring her back. It'll just reopen wounds that need to heal." "All right." Morrison didn't sound convinced, but he also didn't push. "I'll put a hold on the comparison. But Michael, if you change your mind again, if you need anything, you call me day or night. Understood?" "Understood. Thank you, Detective." I ended the call and sat in the parking lot watching normal people go about their normal lives, grocery shopping, walking dogs, arguing about whose turn it was to pick up dry cleaning. Simple problems, honest problems, problems that didn't involve corpse theft and identity fraud and choosing between truth and complicity. My phone buzzed. "Rebecca, thank you. I know what that cost you." I didn't respond. Couldn't find words that captured the mixture of relief and self-loathing churning in my stomach. I'd just obstructed justice, helped cover up multiple felonies, become an active participant in the conspiracy instead of just a victim of it. But I'd also protected a 6-year-old girl from having her world destroyed. Protected a man who'd already lost his brother from losing his wife, too. Protected a homeless woman's final resting place from being disturbed for forensic analysis. I told myself these things mattered. told myself I'd made the right choice. I didn't believe it. The next 3 days were a special kind of hell. I went through the motions of normal life, work, meals, sleep, while my mind replayed every conversation with Rebecca, every moment of my marriage, every decision that had led me to this point. I analyzed memories like crime scene evidence, looking for clues I'd missed. The way Sarah had sometimes paused before answering questions about her childhood, her expression going briefly blank before she'd smile and tell some anecdote that now might be her sister's memory instead of her own. The time she'd run into someone at the grocery store who'd called her Rebecca, and she'd laughed and said the woman must have mistaken her for someone else. I'd believed her then. Why wouldn't I? People got mistaken for other people all the time. The careful way she'd avoided talking about certain periods of her life, changing the subject when I'd asked about college or her 20s. I'd assumed she was just a private person. Turned out she was private because those weren't her experiences to share. Wednesday night, I drove to the cemetery, stood over Diana Walsh's grave with its lying headstone, and tried to make peace with my decision. "I'm sorry," I told the earth. "I'm sorry I'm not giving you justice. I'm sorry you died alone, and your death got used by people who should have protected you instead. But if I expose this, a little girl loses her mother. A grieving widower loses his wife. Your body gets exhumed and examined and turned into evidence, and you still don't get justice because you're still dead. And they can't undo that." The grave didn't answer, just sat there with its granite marker reading Sarah Elizabeth Morrison, beloved wife, in the dates that bracketed a life that had never existed. "For what it's worth," I continued, "I think Rebecca was right about one thing. You have mourners now. People who visit this grave and leave flowers and think about you. They think you're someone else, but they're still thinking about you. That's more than you had before." It was a weak justification, and we both knew it, but it was all I had. Thursday morning, I got a call from Sarah's sister, the real Jennifer Morrison, the one who'd grown up with Sarah in Pennsylvania, who had no idea her sister was alive and well in Sacramento. "Michael, hi. I hope I'm not bothering you." "Never a bother, Jennifer. How are you?" "I'm okay." "Well, no, I'm not okay, but I'm functioning." A pause. "Listen, I wanted to ask you something. Have you noticed anything weird lately? Anything with Sarah's accounts or her identity?" My heart stopped. "What do you mean?" "I got a credit alert yesterday. Someone tried to open a credit card using Sarah's social security number. The application was denied because the credit bureaus show her as deceased, but the attempt was made. I thought maybe it was just identity thieves being ghoulish, but it seemed worth mentioning. Sarah, or Rebecca, one of them was still using Sarah Morrison's identity for something, still generating electronic footprints that could trigger investigations. "That's disturbing," I said carefully. "Did you report it to the police?" "I filed a report with the credit bureaus and the FTC. The police said there wasn't much they could do since the application was denied and no actual fraud occurred." But Michael, it made me think, what if someone stole Sarah's identity before she died? What if that's why she was so stressed those last few months? I'd forgotten Jennifer's theory, her insistence during the funeral that Sarah had been acting strange before the accident. At the time, I dismissed it as grief-twisted memory, seeing significance in normal behavior because the alternative was admitting the death was meaninglessly random. Now, I wondered what Jennifer had actually noticed, what signs Rebecca had given off while living as Sarah, what small inconsistencies had registered with the sisters' intimate knowledge, even if Jennifer hadn't consciously recognized them. "Maybe," I said. "Did she say anything specific about identity theft?" "Not in those words, but she mentioned feeling watched, said someone had been in her apartment while she was at work. Nothing stolen, just things moved slightly." And she was worried about her financial accounts, kept checking them obsessively. I thought she was just being paranoid, but what if she knew someone had stolen her identity? What if Marcus had figured out the twin switch before the accident? What if he'd been the one breaking into the apartment, watching Sarah, trying to determine if the woman he was seeing was really his girlfriend or some imposter? And what if that's why the accident had to happen when it did? Not as a long-planned escape, but as an emergency exit when Marcus got too close to the truth. Jennifer, did Sarah ever mention someone named Marcus Webb? Her ex. Yeah, she talked about him sometimes. Said he'd been abusive, that she was glad to be away from him. Why? He was the other driver in the accident. I saw it in the police report. Silence. Then what? Sarah's ex-boyfriend was the other driver in the crash that killed her? According to the report, they said it was coincidence. Wrong place, wrong time. But Jennifer, what if it wasn't? What if Marcus was following her that night? Oh my God. Jennifer's voice shook. Michael, you need to tell the police this. If Marcus was stalking Sarah, if he caused the accident deliberately, the police already know he was the other driver. They investigated and ruled it accidental. I'm not sure what more they can do, but I could hear Jennifer's mind working, could practically feel her building a narrative that explained her sister's strange behavior without requiring Sarah to be alive. Identity theft, stalking, an abusive ex who might have caused the accident that killed her. It was tidy, believable, wrong in every detail, but right in its emotional truth. I'm going to look into this, Jennifer said. I'm going to find out if Marcus was stalking Sarah before she died. If he was, he should be in prison, not walking around free. Jennifer, be careful. If Marcus is dangerous, then he should be behind bars. Sarah can't get justice, but I can get it for her. After we hung up, I sat with my phone in my hand, realizing I'd just made things exponentially more complicated. Jennifer was going to investigate Marcus. She'd dig into his relationship with Sarah, his whereabouts before the accident, his life in the 5 months since. And if she dug deep enough, she might find something, some inconsistency, some proof that Sarah Morrison was still alive. Or she might confront Marcus, might trigger whatever violent impulses had driven Sarah to such desperate measures in the first place. I needed to warn Rebecca, needed to tell her that Jennifer was asking questions, that the carefully constructed fiction was developing cracks. But first, I needed to talk to Marcus Webb. Finding him was easier than I expected. Marcus had a public Instagram account where he posted gym selfies and motivational quotes and pictures with his new wife, Brittany. Their wedding photos from last month showed a beaming couple cutting cake, dancing, toasting their future together. Marcus looked happy, normal, nothing like the monster Rebecca had described. But abusers never looked like monsters in public. That was the whole point. His profile listed him as a PhD candidate in clinical psychology at State University, which meant he'd be on campus. I drove there Friday afternoon and waited outside the psychology building, watching students come and go until I spotted him. Marcus Webb was tall, athletic, conventionally handsome in a way that probably made people instinctively trust him. He walked with confidence, chatting easily with 2 female students who laughed at something he said. A charmer. The kind of guy who could convince you the sky was green and you'd question your own eyes rather than his word. I followed him to the parking lot, waited until the students left, then approached as he was unlocking his car. Marcus Webb. He turned, smiled automatically, that public face abusers wore so well. Yeah, can I help you? My name is Michael Thompson. I was married to Sarah Morrison. The smile didn't falter, but something shifted in his eyes. A weariness, a calculation. Oh man, I'm so sorry for your loss. That accident, God, it was horrible. I still have nightmares about it. I bet you do. Mind if we talk for a minute? I actually have to get to a study group. This won't take long. Marcus glanced around the parking lot, probably assessing whether I was a threat, whether anyone was watching, what his options were. Then he nodded slowly. Sure. What do you want to know? Tell me about your relationship with Sarah. We dated for about a year and a half. It ended badly. Most college relationships do. We were young, immature, wanted different things. I moved on. She moved on. That's it. That's not what I heard. I heard you were abusive, that you threatened to kill her if she left. Marcus's expression didn't change, but his body language did. Shoulders back, chest out, positioning himself as bigger, more intimidating. Classic dominance display. I don't know what Sarah told you. Sarah didn't tell me anything. She was dead by the time I heard the story. Then you heard it from someone who didn't know the full situation. Look, our relationship had problems. We argued. Things got heated sometimes, but I never laid a hand on Sarah, and I sure as hell never threatened to kill her. So the police reports about domestic disturbances at her apartment, those were what? Mutual arguments. A flicker of surprise. He hadn't expected me to know about police reports. Probably thought his uncle had buried them all. Sarah had issues, Marcus said slowly. Mental health issues. She'd get paranoid, convinced I was out to get her. Call the cops over nothing. I tried to help her, tried to get her into therapy, but she refused. Eventually, I realized I couldn't save someone who didn't want to be saved. So I ended things. The gaslighting was textbook. Turn the victim into the aggressor. Make her mental health the problem instead of his behavior. I'd read enough about abusive relationships in the last few days to recognize every tactic. Funny thing, I said. After you ended things, Sarah seemed to get a lot better. Stopped calling the police. Stopped having mental health issues. Almost like those problems were caused by something external. Or someone. Marcus's jaw tightened. I don't appreciate the implication. I don't appreciate you killing my wife. That was an accident. The police investigated. The police investigated and your uncle made sure it got ruled accidental. But we both know what really happened that night. You were following her, stalking her, and when she swerved to avoid you, you made sure the collision was fatal. I was fishing, throwing out accusations based on speculation and Rebecca's stories, hoping to provoke a reaction. And I got one. Marcus stepped closer, invading my space, his friendly mask slipping to reveal something cold underneath. You don't know what you're talking about. Sarah was unstable. She drove into my lane deliberately, looked me right in the eye before impact. The police report says as much. If anyone's responsible for her death, it's her. She committed suicide and tried to take me with her. Why would she do that? Because she was crazy. Because she blamed me for her problems instead of taking responsibility for her own life. Because she couldn't handle that I'd moved on and found someone better. There it was. The rage underneath the charm. The need to control and punish women who dared to leave him. Found someone better? I repeated. Is that what you tell Brittany? That she's better than your ex-girlfriend? Leave my wife out of this. Does Brittany know about the restraining order Sarah filed? About the police reports? About the fact that you were driving the car that killed her? I said, leave my wife out of this. Marcus's hand shot out and grabbed my jacket, yanking me closer. You need to walk away, Michael. Need to stop asking questions about things that don't concern you. Sarah is dead. I've moved on. You should too. I could smell coffee on his breath, see the barely controlled violence in his eyes. This was the man Sarah and Rebecca had been running from. This was why they'd committed fraud and theft and desecration, because facing Marcus meant facing this rage, this certainty that he owned them even after they'd left. Let go of me, I said quietly. For a moment I thought he wouldn't. Thought he'd escalate, throw a punch, prove exactly what kind of man he was. But then he released me and stepped back, smoothing his jacket like nothing had happened. Go home, Michael. Grieve your wife. Move on with your life. And forget about me, because if you keep digging into my past, you won't like what you find. He got in his car and drove away, leaving me standing in the parking lot with my heart racing and my hands shaking and absolute certainty about one thing. Rebecca had been telling the truth
about Marcus. Every word of it, which meant everything else she'd told me was probably true too. The abuse, the desperation, the impossible situation that had driven two sisters to such extreme measures. And it meant that by stopping the dental comparison, by choosing to protect Sarah's new identity, I might have saved her life. Or I might have just delayed the inevitable moment when Marcus figured out that Sarah Morrison wasn't as dead as he thought. I should have gone home after confronting Marcus, should have locked my doors, poured a drink, and tried to process what I'd learned. Instead, I found myself driving to Sacramento. The 5-hour drive gave me plenty of time to question my sanity. What was I doing? Going to confront Sarah? To warn her about Jennifer's investigation and Marcus's barely contained rage to see for myself the life she'd built on stolen identity and my grief? I didn't have a good answer. I just knew I couldn't sit still anymore. Couldn't keep being a passive observer in a story that had consumed my entire existence. It was nearly 10 p.m. when I pulled onto Maple Grove Lane. The neighborhood was quiet, windows glowing with the warm light of families settling in for the night. David and Sarah's house, I still couldn't think of her as Rebecca, sat at the end of the cul-de-sac, a neat craftsman with a porch swing and a garden that someone clearly tended with care. I parked 3 houses down and watched. Through the living room window I could see movement. David on the couch, laptop open, probably working on something for his job. No sign of Sarah or Emma, likely already in bed given the late hour. My phone buzzed. "Rebecca, where are you?" I'd stopped responding to her texts after our meeting at the park, but apparently she was monitoring me somehow, tracking my phone. Or had she just developed a sixth sense for when I was about to do something that would destabilize her carefully constructed world? I typed back, "Sac, we need to talk, all 3 of us." 3 dots appeared, pulsed, disappeared. Then, "Michael, please don't do this. You'll destroy everything." Everything is already destroyed. I talked to Marcus today. A longer pause then. "Is he coming after Sarah?" "Not yet, but Jennifer is investigating him. She thinks he might have been stalking Sarah before the accident. She's looking for justice for her dead sister." "Oh God, yeah. So here's what's going to happen. I'm going to knock on that door and you're going to let me in. And the 3 of us are going to figure out how to fix this mess before it gets worse. Sarah doesn't know I told you everything. Doesn't know you know about Diana Walsh or the morgue or any of it. She thinks you still believe she's dead. Then it's time she learns otherwise. 5 minutes, Rebecca. Then I'm knocking regardless." I got out of the car and walked up the driveway, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might crack a rib. The porch light flickered on as I approached, motion sensor or someone watching through the window. The door opened before I could knock. Sarah, the real Sarah Morrison, stood in the doorway wearing yoga pants and an oversized Stanford sweatshirt. She looked exactly like Rebecca, exactly like the woman I'd married, but somehow different. The same face arranged in an unfamiliar expression, the same body held with different posture. Or maybe I was imagining differences because I needed there to be differences, needed to believe I could tell the twins apart. "Michael Thompson," she said quietly. "I wondered when you'd show up." "You knew?" "Rebecca told me she'd met with you, told me you'd figured out we'd switched. I've been expecting you to come knock down my door for the past 3 days." She stepped aside. "You might as well come in." The house was exactly what I'd imagined from watching through windows. Tastefully decorated, clean but lived in. Full of evidence of Emma's presence. Art projects on the refrigerator, small shoes by the door, a stack of picture books on the coffee table. David looked up from his laptop as I entered, confusion crossing his face. "Rebecca, who's this? Is Michael Thompson?" "Sarah said he was married to my sister." "Your sister?" David closed the laptop, standing up. "I thought you said you didn't have any family." I lied. Sarah's voice was steady, matter of fact about that and a lot of other things. "Michael, this is my husband, David Murphy." David, Michael, I think we all need to have a very long, very uncomfortable conversation. David looked between us, processing, calculating. He was a data analyst. Rebecca had mentioned that, trained to spot patterns and inconsistencies. Rebecca, what's going on? My name isn't Rebecca. Sarah said, It's Sarah. Sarah Morrison. Rebecca is my identical twin sister, the sister who supposedly died in a car accident 5 months ago. Except she didn't die. I faked her death using a stolen body so I could escape my abusive ex-boyfriend. And in the process, I stole my sister's identity and married you under false pretenses. The silence that followed was profound. David's face went through several expressions: confusion, disbelief, dawning horror, rage, before settling on something that looked like grief. You're telling me, he said slowly, that our entire marriage is based on a lie that you're not the woman I think you are? I'm exactly the woman you think I am. I'm just not the woman you think you married. Sarah moved to sit on the couch, her hands clasped in her lap in that familiar gesture that both she and Rebecca shared. Everything about our relationship was real. My feelings for you, my love for Emma, my commitment to our family, all of that was genuine. The only lie was my name. The only lie. David's voice rose. You stole someone's identity. You married me using a false name. Our marriage isn't even legal. It's legal. The marriage license says Rebecca Lawrence, and that's who I am according to every official document. The government doesn't care that Rebecca and I switched identities 6 years ago. 6 years. David ran his hands through his hair. Jesus Christ. 6 years of lying to me, to Lisa, to Emma. I never lied to Emma. She knows me as her mother, and I am her mother. I gave birth to her. The adoption was supposed to be permanent. But when Tom died and Lisa needed help, I saw a chance to be part of Emma's life again. Everything I did was for her. Everything you did was for yourself. David paced across the living room, his face flushed. You manipulated Lisa. You manipulated me. You used my brother's death as an opportunity to insert yourself into our lives under false pretenses. I love Tom. He was Emma's adoptive father, and he loved her like she was his own. His death broke my heart too. Stop. I spoke for the first time since entering the house. Stop making this about your feelings and your pain. You made choices, selfish, criminal choices that hurt everyone around you. David deserves the truth. Emma deserves the truth. Hell, Diana Walsh deserves the truth, but she's dead and buried in a grave marked with your sister's name. Sarah flinched. Rebecca told you about Diana. She told me everything. The body theft, the staged accident, the life insurance fraud, all of it. Life insurance. David's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. Please tell me you didn't collect life insurance on your sister's fake death. I didn't. Michael did. The policy was in his name as Sarah Morrison's husband. I assume it's sitting untouched in a bank account somewhere, right, Michael? All three of us stood in that living room, a triangle of lies and recriminations, each of us victims and perpetrators in equal measure. Where is she? Sarah asked. Where's Rebecca? I don't know. She's in hiding, living off cash, avoiding cameras. Same as you did before you stole her identity and her life. I didn't steal her life. We traded. She got to live as me, build a relationship with you, have the marriage and the normally she'd always wanted. I got to be her. Start fresh without Marcus hunting me. Except it didn't work that way, did it? Rebecca fell in love with me while pretending to be you. She wanted to tell me the truth, but couldn't without exposing the whole scheme. So she stayed trapped in your identity, living your life while you got everything. Your daughter, a husband, a fresh start. I didn't ask her to fall in love with you. That was her choice. Made while trapped in an impossible situation you created, David held up his hands. Both of you stop.
Just stop for a second and let me think. We stopped, stood in uncomfortable silence while David processed his analyst brain working through the implications and consequences. Okay, he said finally. Let's say I believe all of this. Let's say you really are Sarah Morrison and you really did fake your sister's death to escape an abusive ex. Where does that leave us? Our marriage is based on fraud. Emma's guardianship is based on fraud. Everything is built on lies. The foundation is lies, Sarah said, echoing Rebecca's words from the park. But the life we've built on top of it is real. You love me. I love you. Emma has a mother and a father and a stable home. Does it really matter what name is on the marriage license? Yes. David's shout startled both of us. Yes, it matters. I married Rebecca Lawrence. I made vows to Rebecca Lawrence. I built a life with someone I thought I knew. And it turns out, I don't know you at all. You know everything that matters. You know my sense of humor, my fears, my dreams, my love for our daughter. You know my body, my habits, my favorite foods, the way I like my coffee. You know me, David. The name is just paperwork. The name is identity. The name is trust. The name is the basis of every legal document we've ever signed together. He turned to me. Why are you here, Michael? What do you want from us? Good question. What did I want? Your sister-in-law, Jennifer, is investigating Marcus Webb. I said she thinks he might have been stalking Sarah before the accident. She's digging into his past, his relationship with Sarah, his involvement in the crash. Eventually, she's going to find something that doesn't add up. What kind of something? Sarah asked, her face pale. I don't know. Maybe she'll discover that you had a twin. Maybe she'll find records of Rebecca's existence and start asking why no one's heard from her since the accident. Maybe she'll just talk to the right person who remembers seeing both of you together and realizes you can't be the same person. Jennifer doesn't know about Rebecca. Our parents kept the separation secret. There's no reason for her to suspect. There are always reasons, always breadcrumbs. You can't erase a person's existence completely, not in the digital age. Rebecca had a life, a job, an apartment, friends, social media accounts. Where did all of that go? Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Rebecca shut down her social media, told her friends she was traveling abroad indefinitely, let her apartment lease expire. Her employer thinks she took a remote position with a company in Europe. There's a trail, but it doesn't lead anywhere suspicious. What about her husband? David asks suddenly. Rebecca was married too, right before she became Sarah. Where does he think his wife is? I'd forgotten about that detail. Rebecca had mentioned being married, living in Los Angeles, working as a graphic designer. She'd had a whole life before the switch. Rebecca wasn't married, Sarah said. That was my cover story to explain to David why Rebecca Lawrence was single and available. The real Rebecca was engaged, but she broke it off when we switched identities. Told her fiancé she couldn't go through with the wedding, that she needed to find herself or some such excuse. He was hurt, but he moved on. So you destroyed her relationship too. I said, along with everything else. I gave her a new relationship with you. She loved you, Michael, maybe more than she ever loved her fiancé. Built on lies. All relationships are built on selective truth. We choose what to reveal and what to hide. Rebecca chose to hide more than most, but the love was real. A sound from upstairs, small footsteps on hardwood. All three of us froze. Mommy? Emma's voice, sleepy and uncertain. Who are you talking to? Sarah's expression transformed instantly. Fear and protectiveness and desperate love all mixing together. It's okay, sweetie, go back to bed. Mommy's just talking to some friends. But I heard yelling. We were just having a passionate discussion. Sometimes adults get loud when they're excited about ideas. Everything's fine. Small feet padded to the stairs. Emma appeared at the landing, rubbing her eyes, blonde hair mussed from sleep.
She looked so much like the photos Rebecca had shown me, innocent, trusting, completely unaware that her entire life was built on fraud. When she saw me, she stopped. "Who's that?" "This is Mr. Thompson," Sarah said. "He's an old friend of Mommy's from before you were born." Emma studied me with the brutal honesty of 6-year-olds. "You look sad." "I am a little sad," I admitted. "Why?" "Because I lost someone I loved very much. Like how we lost Uncle Tom." The comparison hit harder than I expected. Yes, like that. Emma walked down the stairs and straight to me. No fear or hesitation. "It gets better. That's what Mommy always tells me when I'm sad about Uncle Tom. It gets better, but you have to let people help you." She hugged me, just wrapped her small arms around my waist and held on. And something in me broke. This child, innocent and kind, raised by a woman who'd lied about everything except her love for her daughter. This child who'd already lost one father and might lose another when David inevitably left after learning the truth. This child who deserved better than the mess the adults in her life had created. Sarah moved to collect Emma, to shepherd her back to bed, but I held up a hand to stop her. "Emma's right. I said it does get better. But only if we make it better. Only if we stop lying and start fixing what's broken." "What are you suggesting?" David asked. "I'm suggesting we tell the truth. Not to the police, not yet. But to the people who deserve to know. To Lisa, to Jennifer. To everyone who's been lied to and manipulated and used." "You want to destroy Emma's life?" Sarah's voice shook. "Want to take away her mother and father and home because we made mistakes trying to survive? I want to give Emma a life built on truth instead of lies. Because right now, this house of cards you've built is going to collapse eventually. Marcus is still out there. Jennifer is investigating. The dental records comparison could still happen if anyone decides to push. And when it all comes crashing down, and it will, Emma is going to be caught in the wreckage." David looked at his daughter, then at his wife, who wasn't his wife, then at me. "What exactly are you proposing?" "I'm proposing we get ahead of this. We come clean before someone else exposes us. We figure out how to tell the truth in a way that protects Emma while holding the adults accountable for their choices." "And then what? I go to prison for body theft and fraud?" Sarah's arms tightened around Emma. "My daughter visits me behind glass and wonders why Mommy is a criminal. Maybe. Or maybe we find a way to make this right that doesn't involve prison. But Sarah, you can't keep running. You can't keep stealing identities and manipulating people and hoping no one notices. Eventually, someone always notices." The Emma had fallen asleep against my shoulder, her breathing deep and even. The trust implicit in that simple act, a child sleeping in a stranger's arms, made my decision for me. "I'm not going to the police," I said. "Not tonight. But I need you both to think about what kind of life you want Emma to have. One built on truth, where she knows who her parents really are and understands that people make mistakes but can choose to do better. Or one built on lies, where she eventually discovers her mother is a fraud and her father was complicit in that fraud." "That's not fair," Sarah whispered. "None of this is fair, but it's what we have to work with." David took Emma from my arms, cradling her with the practiced ease of a parent. "I need time," he said. "Time to process this, to figure out what it means for my marriage and my family. Can you give us that? How much time? A week? Maybe 2? I need to talk to Lisa. Need to understand the full scope of what Sarah did with Emma's adoption. Need to decide if I can stay married to someone whose real name I didn't even know. And if you decide you can't, then we figure out how to separate in a way that protects Emma. But whatever happens, I'm not letting my daughter pay the price for our mistakes." I looked at Sarah, waiting for her to argue, to manipulate, to deploy whatever tactics she'd used to get this far. But she just stood there,
tears streaming down her face, watching her husband carry their daughter upstairs. "I never meant for it to go this far," she said once David was gone. "It was supposed to be temporary. 2 months of switching places, just long enough for Marcus to move on. Then Rebecca and I would switch back and everything would return to normal."
But there's no such thing as temporary when it comes to identity theft. No such thing as a small lie when it touches this many lives.
I know. And I'm sorry. But Michael, I need you to understand, everything I did to survive, to protect my daughter, to escape a man who would have killed me if I'd stayed. I believe you. I met Marcus today. I saw exactly what kind of man he is. Sarah's head snapped up. You confronted him? I wanted to see for myself if Rebecca was telling the truth about the abuse. She was. He grabbed me, threatened me, made it very clear that he's capable of violence. Did you tell him about me? About Emma? No. But Sarah, he's going to figure it out eventually. Jennifer's investigation, or someone recognizing you, or just random chance. You can't hide forever. I can try. And when you fail, when Emma's whole world comes crashing down because you tried to outrun consequences instead of facing them? Sarah sank onto the couch, her face in her hands. What would you have done if someone was threatening to kill you and you had a daughter to protect and the police wouldn't help because your abuser had connections? What would you have done? I don't know, I admitted. But I'd like to think I would have found a solution that didn't involve stealing bodies and destroying other people's lives. Easy to say when you're not the one being hunted. We sat in silence, 2 people connected by lies and love, and a dead woman named Diana Walsh. Outside, the neighborhood slept peacefully, unaware of the drama unfolding in the house at the end of Maple Grove Lane. My phone buzzed. Rebecca, are you okay? Please tell me you didn't do anything stupid. I looked at the message. Then, it's Sarah. Your sister wants to know if I did anything stupid. Did you? I'm not sure yet, but I think I might have started the process of making things right, or at least less wrong. Sarah laughed, a broken sound. Less wrong. That's the best we can hope for at this point, isn't it? Maybe. Or maybe we can hope for truth, for honesty. For Emma, growing up knowing that her parents made terrible mistakes but owned up to them and tried to do better. You're an optimist. No, I'm just tired of lies. I drove back to Millbrook in the early morning hours, my mind replaying the conversation with Sarah and David on an endless loop. The sun was rising when I pulled into my driveway, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that felt obscenely beautiful given the ugliness I'd just witnessed. Rebecca was sitting on my front porch. She stood when she saw me, her messenger bag clutched against her chest like a shield. I couldn't stay away. I needed to know what happened. You need to stop tracking me. I'm not tracking you, I just knew where you'd go. She followed me to the door. Did you tell David everything? Sarah told him. She came clean about the identity switch, the fake death, all of it. Rebecca's face went pale. And he's deciding whether to stay married to a woman whose real name he didn't know? Whether to keep raising a daughter with someone who built their entire relationship on lies? I unlocked the door and walked inside, leaving it open for her to follow. The house felt different now. Not haunted by Sarah's ghost, but by the memory of Rebecca pretending to be Sarah. Every room held echoes of our life together, and I couldn't tell anymore which moments had been real and which had been performance. What about Jennifer? Rebecca asked. Did you tell Sarah about the investigation? Yes. She's worried Marcus will figure out she's alive. He will, eventually. Men like Marcus always do. I made coffee, the terrible Colombian blend that neither Sarah nor Rebecca had ever liked. My hands shook as I poured, exhaustion and emotional overload finally catching up. I can't keep doing this, I said.
Can't keep being the person who knows the truth but doesn't tell it. Can't keep protecting everyone while my own life falls apart. Rebecca moved closer. What are you saying? I'm saying I need you to leave. Need you to disappear back into whatever identity you're building and let me figure out how to move forward. Michael, please. I set down my coffee cup before I dropped it. I loved you. God help me, I still love you. But I can't be with someone I can't trust. Can't build a future on a foundation this broken. Tears streamed down her face. So that's it. We're just done. We've been done since March. I just didn't know it yet. She stood there for a long moment, then slowly nodded. Okay, but Michael, thank you for not going to the police, for protecting Sarah and Emma, for choosing mercy over justice. I didn't choose mercy. I just chose the option that hurt the fewest innocent people. Rebecca kissed my cheek, a goodbye that felt like an ending and a beginning all at once. Then she walked out of my house and out of my life, leaving me alone with my terrible coffee and my memories of a marriage that had never really existed.